Yes. So we're here live at JazzCon in New Orleans, and I'm here with Pearl.
Yes.
And can you give us a bit of a feedback what you do in day-to-day life? What made you here become a speaker? What do you do for a living?
I am a web developer in Madison, Wisconsin, at a consultancy. So we make custom software for clients. Um, we're primarily a Rails shop, but actually end up writing a lot more JavaScript
Hmm.
than I do Rails.
And you gave a talk here about web components and how,
Yes.
especially how they work together with Angular solutions, as far as I get it. How was the feedback for that? Did people use them already? Did you tell them something new? Did you get a lot of good questions?
We got good questions. We got questions about Um, accessibility, which I thought were very interesting questions that I don't have great answers for,
Yeah.
and we got some questions um, about support in old IE,
Hmm.
which again I don't have good answers for.
Because the problem with web components is that I mean, it's like 5 years now, 4 years that we started talking about web components and seeing the need for them to have like very componentized products that have like different parts of the page maintained by different parts of the company, or you
Yes.
have a button that always have to look and work the same, and you want to have
Yes.
them independent of the outside CSS.
Yes.
So we tried to make it work on the browser level, but a lot of the stuff did not work out because it was really hard on performance.
Uh huh.
So it seems like places like Angular or React or other environments are a thing where it actually makes sense to use components much more because uh, uh, you already have the borders aligned rather than
Uh
that.
huh. Well, I think that native web components are coming into their own. Well, they're not quite there yet. There's still some things to get figured out, but we have four newish web standards that together, custom elements in particular, that's the essential ingredient. But with custom elements version 1 that's being adopted by the major browsers right now, um, I think native web components are becoming a realistic thing, and that can operate in any kind of framework.
Hmm.
So most big companies use not just Angular, not just Rails. They are using a lot of different frameworks. So having a native component that's portable to lots of different kinds of environments, that's going to work in any browser and in any context. I think that's a pretty exciting idea.
Hmm. And it gives you a consistency as well of interfaces that we don't have before. Like there's
Yeah.
in the jQuery world, we had lots and lots of, for example, image galleries, and all of them worked differently and didn't work.
Yeah.
And if you componentize them into a reusable component within a framework, it's much easier to offer them and just allow a certain size of customization rather than allowing complete control over them.
Well, yes, exactly, and that's what's so exciting, I think, about web components is that we can define the API that we want the component to have. Such that it's like an image tag, a standard image tag has an API. It's got different properties that you can add, and it's got the source attribute, that that's expecting a certain kind of input. But with web components, we can specify in much more detail what the API is, what parameters can be set, and the developer doesn't need to know about the inner workings. So if you've got a bunch of people on a team using the component, they can just look at the API and specify what parameters have been set.
What are the main worries of people? You already said accessibility was one that was questioned,
Yeah.
and do you think there is a what we see as a benefit of having control and only allowing people to maintain a few things? Is that something that people don't like, that they want to have their own controls all the time rather than using something that's already ready?
Well, I think that we've all seen the problem um, of jQuery based code, JavaScript code that's been worked on by lots of different people that may be sprinkled throughout a whole code base and tracking things down, if you want to maintain consistency across your site with the UI and with functionality, that can be really hard and things get very messy. So I think I see web components as sort of a solution to the problem of spaghetti code, of code that's written by different developers at different times who might not even be aware of what other JavaScript is on the code base.
Is there a danger that we're running into style fashions? Like, I mean, material design from Google, for example, is a big thing, and it's a very beautiful interface on mobile devices. On desktop, it sometimes feels kind of alien. It feels kind of like, okay, I've got more screen space. Why don't I use it?
Uh-huh.
And there was when it came out, there was performance issues with it, but those got resolved by Google as well. Do you think there is a danger of like building things that all look the same? And is that a thing that end users benefit from, or is it something that we have to jump our own shadow and say like we don't have to make everything look different?
Well, well, what do you think? I mean, I think material design is lovely. I mean, and yes, it is. It does make things look alike. I'm not a designer. As a developer, it's nice that I can use material design components, for instance, from Polymer or from other sources that look nice, and I don't have to be responsible for making them look nice because I'm not good at that.
There is something to be said about not allowing developers to design things, because we've all
We're
seen the
bad.
interfaces that come out of that, like
Yeah, we're
drop-down
terrible at that.
boxes, interconnected ones, and like
Yeah.
radio buttons for everything that should be a proper input box.
Yeah.
What we do with these interfaces, though, is we kind of make ourselves dependent on a lot of things that might be breaking. Like we include whole CSS frameworks, we include whole JavaScript frameworks. So how can we ensure that in very very normal situations like flaky connectivity, we're not building an interface that never shows up? Is there a timeout that after a while it just becomes a normal input element rather than an extended one? How do we do that?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't have a great answer uh, for you. I think that something that's coming, again, we're not there yet, is web components that extend existing elements, like an input element, like an image element, like a div. So I think this isn't very well supported currently, but part of the custom element spec does allow for extending existing elements. So in that case, the original element would be a great kind of fallback. And you can think of the component as a kind of progressive
It's
enhancement.
it's kind of built in HTML, like an input type range. If the browser doesn't support what the range is, it just shows an input box.
Yeah.
The problem is though, if it shows a range that is not usable, we cannot override it. So in the case of a web component, we would have full control over that. But it also means that we're reliable for it. Like,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I always find when we talk to people about web components, especially web components libraries, the reliability of things, people don't want to take on this responsibility. How do
Uh-huh.
we get developers to understand that if they're building custom interfaces, it's also up to them to make them performant and have error messaging that makes sense?
Error messaging that makes sense and good fallbacks for bad connectivity, and accessibility. There are all these things that I think that it's been easy for a lot of us to kind of ignore or think, oh yeah, when I have more time later, I'll make sure this is performant, or when I have time later, I'll make sure it's accessible. But I think as a community, we need to be more tuned into those things.
Do you think more input from the design community would work better in that? There's always when you talk about material design to design communities, they're like, yeah, it's beautiful, but it's too restrictive. I don't want to do that. But at the same time, these people have great insights of how to make things usable.
Yeah.
So we need to cross that boundary between those two communities, and it doesn't help when there's design conference and developer conferences.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think there is a way to reach out to each other and to get more input?
With it, I don't know. I definitely agree with you that it would be so nice if designers and developers were talking to each other more often. It seems like often there's conversation that should be happening that we could help each other and inform each other, and develop things together. That doesn't happen very often. When it does, it's pretty exciting. But
Yeah, I think good things happen. I mean, I'm not saying that there's no input. I mean, the material design team is huge, and they
yeah.
did some really, really good research into it. Before that, I used to work for YUI, and we did a lot of
Oh
research
yeah.
into our interfaces as well. Hayden Pickering just released a resource where they started talking about accessible components that are optimized for assistive technology, but it seems to be always piecemeal rather than one movement. It seems like we're getting excited about something, then we dismiss it, and something new comes out, and we're
Uh-huh.
doing something new. Like, how do we get out of this vicious cycle of innovation and like finding a quick solution for innovation?
We like the new shiny thing, right? Well, maybe you need to lead us in the right direction.
Well, but a lot of people have been leading and have been led astray by others and not supported. That's the main
Yes.
issue.
Yeah.
I think in the end, it's a lot of it is like we have to overcome the concept of developer convenience trumping over user interfaces.
But that's yeah, and that's a hard one, right? Because developers were often under enormous time pressure to get things done. Um, so we take shortcuts, we do what's easy, rather than what's the best practice. Sometimes, I mean, not me. I never, right?
So is that a thing that we should be more self-assured about ourselves? I always feel like if I go to a plumber and I say like, you know what, fix my bathroom, and here's some old pieces of pipe and some screwdriver that I have, please use those. They would not do it.
Right.
But with web development, we always do it that way. Like we would like to do it properly, but like the client says like we're only paying for so and so many hours, so we hush it up. And I find it annoying when like after 4 years of like freelancing, you don't have anything to show in your CV that you're actually proud of, because you always jump into that era of making things too fast.
Yes, yes. I don't know. I'm incredibly lucky that I work for a company that really values the quality of the work that we do, and just won't work under conditions that don't allow for quality work. It'd be great if more companies were like that, but I don't know. I don't know. I think the marketplace is always going to produce really great and really horrible stuff.
So you spoke here
Uh-huh.
on behalf of your company, I assume. Do you have any tips for people that want to do the same thing? That like, I mean, it always seems so glamorous to be on stage and talk about the
Uh-huh.
things that you're doing, but it's a lot of people are like hindered by their company not supporting them. So what
Uh-huh.
did you do to make it happen?
Oh, I love speaking, and what I co-present with my colleague Abraham, who's standing over there, and that has been a great way to kind of break into speaking at conferences, is to do it with a colleague. Because then you can support each other, and it helps with nervousness. Definitely, you're not all alone.
Camera, who cares?
Yeah. Um, so I think we got started just by having some technologies that we were curious about and wanted to learn more about, and so we started doing projects and applying to conferences.
Excellent. So next time bring a designer and then we can solve the problem of design and development together.
All right, all right. I know some good designers. We'll do that.
Thank you very much, Pearl.
Thank you.
Yeah. Shall we get the next one in? I mind. I'm not seeing any screen at the moment. Ha. All right, so that was Pearl on web components. Now I don't know who's coming next, but we'll see what's gonna be the case there. And we're going through random speakers at the moment here. Also, if there's people walking past, it's obviously because a massive rig of a big light and a camera is not enough to tell people that this might not be a right place to be.
All right. Do I sound all right? Good. Cool.
All right. So How about you introduce yourself and what you've been talking about here? This is quite a shirt for a camera that every cameraman hates you because it will be quite
Well, my wife and I went to Hawaii for our 10th anniversary, and so I had to buy lots of Hawaiian shirts.
nice.
And I knew New Orleans would be warm and humid. I mean, relative to Oregon right now. So
It's kind of weird though
yeah,
because this is a very timid one. Normally, the idea of a Hawaii shirt is that you can drop any kind of food on it and it doesn't show a stain that actually isn't there already.
that is what I wore yesterday. I had the more wild one, but
Nice. So going back to
yeah,
being professional about this, why don't you give us an introduction of who you are and what you've done here at
sure.
JazzCon?
So my name is Josh Marnacci. I am the head of developer evangelism at PubNub. And PubNub, we make a data stream network. It is real-time as a service. So much like you would hire a company like Akamai to be your CDN for static data, you would hire somebody like us for moving or dynamic data with very low latency. So like chat applications, tracking sensors. If you had, say, you were building a taxi cab app, you need to know where the taxis are, and that information, if it's a minute late, that's useless. It's got to be there really fast, and we guarantee quarter-second latency.
It was very interesting because when the whole system about the real-time web came out and everybody said like everything is going to be real-time web, and then of course everybody built a chat client, and
Right.
then we realized like it's not that necessary that everybody has a chat client. But I think the finance market, especially with like live data in terms of investments, that's a big market that you're covering with that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Data acquisition, finance, like a lot of casual gaming where there's high scores, there's matchmaking between people on cell phones, and you have to deal with proxies and bad latency cell phone towers. But I think with real time, there was, there's that hype cycle where everything, it's the next big thing, and then we get to that trough of disillusionment. But now we're at the point where people are just, it's not the big thing, it's something everybody needs to do, and we're figuring out what it's actually good for.
Hmm.
I'd say probably half of our customers are doing some kind of chat, but the other half are doing a lot of wide variety of things. So the reason I'm here, I was talking about real-time data visualization. So you have all this data going through the network, maybe driving computation. You also want to know what it's doing, and that used to require a lot of code and infrastructure to do. And so we took D3, which is the very popular SVG-based open source library, and C3, which is prefab charts for D3. We added a real-time component. So now with a few lines of code, you can see what your data stream is doing, have your charts and graphs. And then if you need more, there are companies who specialize in that now. So I guess my real message is figure out what you need and get companies who specialize in that to do that part for you so you can focus on what you're actually trying to solve.
Because I mean, it is very easy to set up something yourself. I mean, there's other services like Pusher, and there's like all
Right.
kind of like libraries, especially in the Node world, that
Yeah, like
promise you
Socket.io.
you real time information. But keeping it secure and keeping it also from securing against packet loss is something that is much harder to do. Especially you talked about latency on mobile networks and
Right.
latency on like wirelesses like here that keep trying to remember if you're validated with the wireless or not. That's a lot of latency coming out that
Yes.
way. So how do you deal with the kind of error handling in this case? Is there API logging? Is there timeouts built into the system, or is there caching
There's
built into the system?
all of the above. So we provide, well, there is a raw HTTP API that you could use. Nobody uses it. They use one of our SDKs. And we don't rely on the community to build SDKs. Every SDK we have, we built. So we have all the major platforms plus, there's all the standard languages you would use in iOS and Android and Windows Phone, but we also support, like we have our own Arduino library that you can drop in. So if your Arduino has Wi-Fi built in, then you can publish directly to the network. We built one for Roku because we had a customer who wanted it. The idea is that our developers shouldn't have to worry about all of that stuff. So there are settings you can tweak for things like heartbeat timeouts to help manage that, and push notification backup. for when, like, if your app isn't running anymore, but you need to send an alert to one of your customers, then we can proxy that to the push gateway for their platform, just to Apple for iOS and to Google for Android. And so we handle all of those little details, and I can get into how it works. But the point is that's infrastructure. Like that's we've had customers who started with like a Socket.io server, and it worked great for 100 simultaneous users. But once they tried to scale, they were running into these issues, and they realized that's not really the business they wanted to be in. They had some other problem they were trying to solve, like a web page to track the election or real-time voting, something like that.
So, do you have partners in the cloud computing space that you're dealing with that, or do you have your own CDNs, your
So
own?
we run our network, 15 data centers around the world, and we have a team of people who their whole job is just to make sure that runs perfectly and efficiently. In addition, for the things that we don't provide, like so the second talk I did here was building chatbots on our new serverless infrastructure. Now we don't do AI, like we are about network. But so we've been partnering with companies like IBM and Cloudinary who have API-driven AI systems. So again,
Cloudinary is based on Microsoft Cognitive Services as well.
right,
So yeah.
yeah. So they, you can call like whatever it is you want to detect faces. You want to train a chat bot with like a knowledge base of stuff. There are companies who do this for a living, and they've made it really easy to work with. I don't need to set up TensorFlow and a giant stack of GPUs. IBM or Microsoft will do that for me. So we've been partnering with them to create essentially sample code that shows you, like, if you want to do real-time translation between languages. So I'm typing in English, this person's typing in French, and in a quarter second, my message gets to them, or gets to the middle, is translated, and then gets to them with IBM. So that's like 10 lines of code.
Skype does that with audio now as well, that you can speak in one language
Really?
and
I
it
didn't
comes
know
out in
that.
another language. It's really, we worked together with the police in Sweden to allow Syrian refugees to speak in Arabic, and then it came out in Swedish for the police officers to ask for
Yeah,
information.
fascinating.
And it's pretty heavy and intensive to the machine. Of course, because text translation is easier than sound translation, of course. But it's a very interesting world that we live in. Chatbots are an interesting one because, I mean, we've announced that last build that it's like chatbots are new apps, and Facebook had their whole stuff and others as well. But it seems like that hype is getting a bit on the brink now of falling over as well. Like Facebook just changed off all from their bots to menus in Facebook Messenger. And it seems like this is a revolution that everybody is excited about, but nobody really wants to lead.
I think it's with any technology we build up hype, and then nothing can live up to the hype that was around it. But then as we start digging into it, we discover what it's actually good for. I think with chatbots, it wasn't so much the I can type text versus use menus. It was I can get the functionality of an app without actually finding it in a store and downloading and installing the app.
Yeah.
Like, do I need an app to order a pizza? Like, that should either be a web page or something embedded in where I already am, which is, if I'm already in Facebook Messenger, which is kind of the default one in the U.S. In other countries, there's other leaders, but go to where the users are.
Yeah, and I talked about PWAs, and it's the same thing there. 71% of users are lost in the download the app stage because they don't want to go there. So having a service like a chatbot that actually allows me to interact with it in a human way is much easier. I found it also exciting when you had bots that called other bots on demand. Basically, when you had like a hotel booking or a flight booking, and then there was another hotel system that the flight bot would bring in and communicate with that.
Right.
One big problem I found, though, is that with the success of Siri and Cortana and the intelligence and the artificial intelligence that are in these systems, we brought up a lot of assumptions by people. So having a normal bot that is based on FAQ or is basically a glorified FAQ is not good enough anymore. People expect bots all of them to be like Cortana and Siri, and that makes no sense.
It's we have a bit of a uncanny valley thing here where no bot lives up to our promise for it, and people can get disillusioned. And I think we'll get past that, but I do wonder sometimes if it's a generational thing. So I have a son who's 5, and I find it like a teddy bear that talks to me to be incredibly creepy. But he doesn't. He's used to everything around him having varying levels of intelligence. He'll talk to Siri on the iPad. He has a smart teddy bear. He will use YouTube and talk to other people who aren't live. I mean, he seems to scale the kind of embodied cognition spectrum really easily in a way that I find difficult.
Well,
So maybe
it is
it
being
won't
born
happen.
into it, isn't it? I mean, like the amount of people that you see that, like, I mean, I love that video of the kid that had like a paper magazine and tried to swipe the images
Yes.
because that's how they're used. That everything is connected all the time. Of course, what that brings up is security and privacy issues. I mean,
Yep.
there is a smart toy provider that just got hacked, and now all the recordings, the sound and video recordings of the kids talking to these things are being held ransom for bitcoins.
Yeah.
And this
It's a
is just
problem.
this is a real annoyance that that we. I mean, it's great if our end users think everything is magical, but if companies sell things as like, oh, it's only 5 lines of code, and please trust us that we know
Right.
everything about security, then we're in real trouble.
Yeah, we've so one thing that we've started doing is providing security white papers. Like here's how to use our APIs, but this is the best way to architect your application. A good example: there is a smart bassinet for newborns. Because when you've just had a baby, you're not getting any sleep, and anything that will let you get even an hour extra sleep is worth a lot of money.
Hmm.
So they use PubNub for all of the connectivity because they said we're in the business of making the physical bassinet and all of the interactions. We don't want to worry about the connectivity. We just want to make sure it's secure. And we had already gone through all of the annoying stuff for HIPAA compliance for medical use, so it was perfect for them. So we can guarantee that their stuff is secure end to end, and they can use extra encryption so that even we can't read it because we don't want to know what those messages are. And we provide a service. We have our customer architects who talk to customers and help them design that solution. So in the case of something that is interactive like the bassinet, you don't really want to store anything at any point. There's a difference between storing everything and just storing logs for diagnostics. And
Although you still have if you could store the data locally for yourself, you could get data insights into what happens, sleep patterns, all kind of things. But it's always it's a siren song of having lots of data and getting insights into it.
right,
And at the same time, you're just thinking like, okay, if the whole data goes away somewhere, that's worse than like a stream of like 5 seconds.
yeah,
So it's always a problem of like same with fitness trackers. People are super excited about fitness trackers, but this data goes somewhere as well. And next
right.
time you go to the doctor, it might get more expensive because they saw your fitness data.
Right. There are ways to anonymize it, um, but at the same time, as AI has gotten better, there's ways to de-anonymize data. So it's always going to be a balance between the two, and I think ultimately we can't just say this is the way to do it, and we're done. Like we learned with spam, we've learned with comment moderation. It's always a war that you're going to be fighting, and our job as makers of products is to keep up on the latest.
It's interesting how streaming became such a normal thing. I'm still the kind of old school person that always is in bad connections or remembers all bad connections. And other people, I mean, you sit in a hotel lounge or in an airport lounge and people turn on Netflix and watch videos. And I find it arrogant because, I mean, there's just 50 people in the room that
I
want to
know.
just check their emails and you're using up
Yeah.
most of it. But Netflix had an interesting one that they're now using artificial intelligence to do adaptive streaming according to the content of the video.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Interesting.
I remember back in the days when we really wanted to save bytes on JPEGs and we had a black background, you'd blur the background because then
Right.
the JPEG artifacts didn't show up.
Right.
And that's something similar there. So there's a lot of intelligence in streaming and streaming quality. In your case, it's a different story because you cannot alter the data. It has to be
Right.
pristine the way it is. You cannot do
It is, but
any.
it's typically very small pieces of data,
Yeah.
where the latency and security is what people focus on.
What's the biggest challenge you had to build? What was the most amazing project that you're really excited about that you made happen?
So I just showed this earlier today. I made a chatbot called Mr. Rockbot, and after Mr. Robot, and but he only tells you information about rocks, like geology, or geology-related jokes. So I had to combine the AI service from IBM, and then Wikipedia to get all of the rock facts, and then Giphy for some funny images. And then the final hack that I put together, I just learned earlier this week how to build Amazon Alexa skills. So I've turned Mr. Rockbot into a skill. So I can say, Alexa, please ask Mr. Rockbot, what is granite? And then it will launch my thing and do it. And it was a wonderful hack because you have all these pieces working together. But every system uses a different kind of authentication. They're at least all encrypted now. 5 years ago, most of these would not have been encrypted.
Yeah.
But there's still a lot of work to be done to tie all these systems together. Both IBM and Alexa have a sense of intent and entities, which is a common thing in natural language processing, but they have slightly different definitions on kind of mapping between them. There's still a lot of plumbing to be written.
How do you see the? I mean, I like that Skype lists bots as a special group in my contacts because I find it kind of weird that, like, to me, messaging was always a very personal thing. It was a very,
Right.
like, last resort. If email failed, if Slack failed, I messaged people directly, and this is a very one-to-one, very personal relationship. And now we're actually getting lots of bots in the middle of those, and if the UX isn't right, it just feels weird that, like, when I talk to my friend, out of a sudden the pizza bot comes in and, like, you guys talk about pizza. Do you want to order one?
Right.
And
Yeah, that's creepy.
Facebook just announced that they want to show ads in Messenger, and I find this awful. And there's not even a chance
Yeah.
to pay for it not to happen.
I might not use Messenger as much anymore if they do that.
But that's another problem. XKCD just had a good joke about this, where they're like the Venn diagram of messaging systems. Like every half year, we have a new cool messaging system that all your friends are going to, or you have like 20% of your friends there, 20% of your friends there, and you end up with like
Yeah.
15 things on your machine just to keep in contact with the people that you are. I think this is the kind of market that's kind of getting ripe for standardization. We had
I
things like
hope
that
so.
before, but it seems not going anywhere, right?
I think there are a lot of entrenched interests who really want to own that customer relationship. Facebook wants to be the thing that you talk to. It's not necessarily who you talk to, but that you're talking to them through Facebook. And of course, Twitter wants the same, and Google wants the same. I don't know what the answer is, but I agree it's frustrating.
Yeah.
I at one point I had to sort of split my online life in half, and so I used Facebook as basically a global grandchild photo distribution system. Like I'm on Facebook because I post pictures of my kids so my mom can see it, and I made my profile private. Like I don't want people who meet me at conferences to friend me on Facebook to see photos of my son or my wife. And then decided Twitter was going to be, originally it was Google Plus, but that kind of went away. So Twitter is like my professional thing. And I used to kind of mock the idea of personas, but it's something I eventually had to do. And I wonder in the future if that will just be something kids learn about. It's like I have my personal life, maybe there's like school, there's family, there's professional, and you have to be conscious of those three and keep them all separate. Maybe we'll have special tools to help you, manage your online life like that.
That could actually be location based. I mean, that's where geofencing comes in as well, where
Hmm.
like certain information is not available when you're at home, so people don't know where you live, kind of thing.
Right.
And there is a lot of privacy and security concerns in this one as well. But as you said, like the teaching kids not to over interact with things that they don't know where the data goes is
Right.
going to be one of the main challenges of the next few years, because security is not even hacking people anymore. It's just stopping people from voluntarily giving away too much information.
Yeah. One of our partners has they have a couple of APIs for filtering things like bad words, or looking for pornography or things you would expect to have filters for if you're building like a comment system. They had one that was a filter for personal information. So if someone starts typing in a phone number, this will detect, oh, you're typing in a phone number. Maybe you should reconsider that.
Nice.
And putting more the responsibility onto the platform owner, saying, if you're going to have people using your system, then it's your responsibility to keep them at least somewhat safe.
I like that plugin for Gmail that checked your time of date, and when it was late, it expected you to be drunk, so it gave you a math riddle before you can send off your email.
Oh, wow. I hadn't seen that. That's awesome.
There's lots of opportunities there, so I think that was interesting. There's lots of stuff to be had. The videos were recorded, I guess, as well, so you can see your talks later on.
Yep.
And if you want to learn more about real-time communication, PubNub is one of the players that actually is available for you to play with, and you see that through it you can get to other systems that might be harder to get access to, because IBM Bluemix is quite an interesting thing, but getting directly access to Watson is quite a hefty
and they keep changing
bill.
their specs. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we created blocks, to make it easy to tie these different things together.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We do it quickly. Ooh, brownies. See if the weed kicks in.
Yeah, I think they are going to be regular ones. But you never know.
You want these two folks together, or
I don't mind.
Whatever
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I don't know.
I only have 2 mics, unfortunately.
If we do one by one, we can throw from the back.
All right.
All right. I think something broke on my phone. Okay. Well, we're still here live at JazzCon. We're right now at a break, so people in front of us are eating brownies and teasing us and all kind of things. I just made, probably with my microphone, a joke about the brownies being special kind. They're not. They're normal brownies. It's all legal and above board here. So I'm here with Jen Looper, and you just finished a talk quite earlier today.
Actually, it was yesterday evening, so probably the days are all blending together
Yeah.
at this point. But
Yeah.
mine was the 4:30 session yesterday on native scripts.
Okay.
It was basically talking about how you can build really fast native apps using native script, which is what I'm here to talk about. So it was really fun.
Okay. Seeing that a lot of the movement is going away from native apps to progressive web apps and to embedded systems and to microservices, these kind of things. What is the main use case that you see native script for? How much do people what do people want from it that is not to do with like more classical interfaces like C++ or C# based apps?
Right. So I mean, it's a great question, because I think there's a lot of push and pull between this concept of a downloadable app that you go to Google Play or you go to iTunes Connect and you grab the app that you need, versus a nice progressive web app which you can just pull up, place on your home screen. But for me, the catch is how to monetize my work if I just have a progressive web app, and also how to handle iOS. So it's really the kind of that truly cross-platform story that we're trying to solve with these downloadable apps, continuing with the native story. Hopefully it'll keep going as strong as it is.
Where the spanner in the work of the cross-platform is basically iOS not allowing functionality of other platforms.
Right. That's kind of how Apple rolls. And I can understand where they're coming from, though, because they make so much money off of their downloadable apps. I don't think they would ever really embrace the progressive story. but a progressive web app might be great for someone with a very, very strong Android user base. I can totally understand the use case for that. So it's very interesting to watch.
So in terms of iOS support, what is the benefit of going NativeScript rather than Swift?
So with NativeScript, you're able to also cover the Android story. So you basically are writing in JavaScript, TypeScript, or you can use Angular as well. And then you have your code base that's able to cover both Android and iOS. So you have that dual coverage as opposed to just a Swift, native Swift app. You'd have to redo the whole thing in Java for your story.
And how does React Native come into that?
React Native is probably the closest technology to NativeScript. Can anybody hear what I'm saying?
We can't hear ourselves. People, we're streaming live here. Can you keep it a bit down? We can't hear ourselves.
Also, you're talking to the person who has the softest voice on the planet, so I apologize.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Also, the battery is running low, so we're actually going to see how long the monitor is going to happen here. But okay.
Okay, right.
So we were
React
back to NativeScript towards React Native, yeah.
So I think that some of the true trailblazers in this space
We'll start again, not to worry.
it's React Native.
Well, I understand that, but like, it's probably still recording, but we can't see it. That's the problem right now. So this has happened. You're just running out of battery, so you log in again. The top block is not turned on, or it's broken. That's why. All right, we probably are back.
Totally forgot what we were saying.
Alright, we're live. Okay, let's start that one again.
Was that again? React Native, right?
We had a lot of stuff going on. I mean, I'm here with Jen Looper, and you talked at JazzCon here in New Orleans about NativeScript and building applications with NativeScript. And the big thing that we talked about earlier was like, how is it related to PWAs and web content, and if native apps are still the thing to use. And then I talked about Swift, and now we ended up with like React Native versus NativeScript. So where are the benefits of either, and why would you prefer NativeScript over something like React Native?
Right. Well, I think it has to do with the tech stack that you are either inheriting or that you've chosen. If you are someone who absolutely loves React, absolutely you're going to choose React Native. It's a perfect fit. With NativeScript, we have the option to write in either what we call vanilla NativeScript, which is just JavaScript or TypeScript, and then you can just go ahead and leverage the modules that we give you and our way of writing things, and then you go ahead and deploy for iOS and Android. Or you can use Angular 2, which offers this great code sharing story that is a real money proposition for a lot of corporations. We're finding a lot of bigger enterprises who have already bought into the Angular 2 story are interested in building their mobile apps as long as they have this big Angular 2 integration. Roll up a mobile app on top of it, and it works beautifully.
So how does it work with I mean, the creation of the app is one thing, but getting it listed into the closed market spaces, especially changes, there could be like up to 2 weeks in between where Apple says like, you can't update it.
Actually, Apple has gotten a lot better. I just posted a new app in, and it went in live in 2 days. It knocked me over with a feather because it used to be just horrific. But I think they must have boosted their number of people who are reviewing the apps, and they're quickly getting your stuff live. The interesting thing in Apple right now is that they're stopping live updating apps. So I think Rollup.io, they're blocking those kind of apps And I'm very curious whether my integration with Firebase's remote config, which is sort of the same thing, you can push content in while the app is live without having to refresh the entire app, whether that's going to be blocked by Apple. I'm very curious to see.
Didn't they just block the hot update
Yes.
possibilities?
Yeah.
So that was one thing
For
that
roll
was
up, yeah.
that was great for the end user, for the end user as a developer or developer as an end user. But I think they listed security
Introduced
concerns about it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, you could send through a nice little worm and then all hell can break loose, I can imagine. But I have a wonderful iOS app, I'm sure it's native, called Forks Over Knives. It's a vegetarian recipe app. And it's very clear what they're doing. They're hot pushing recipes in and then giving little banner updates. So I hope that app won't have problems, because that's exactly the use case that people want it for.
there's always been a massive whenever I talked about Firefox OS and I talked about application in HTML5, there was always the thing like, yeah, but the UX of native apps is so much better. What are the key differentiators that you still think a native application can do much better than one based on web technology? What are the things that we haven't caught up with yet?
I mean, I think that there's a rapprochement, there's a closer and closer gathering together of web to native functionality. Like look at Web Bluetooth, which just was introduced. But off the top of my head, I have to go to Can I Use. But there are various native functionalities that the web isn't able to provide yet, but it's coming soon, like the payment API, I believe, this kind of thing. It'll be really interesting to see the convergence of the two. And I guess it all comes down as well to browser compatibility on the web, as I understand. So with the native ecosystem, you have this closed garden, at least especially for iOS, so that they're going to be supporting X, Y, and Z, and you can build for that. So, and the phones will handle it because they're in the business of selling the hardware. So
there is a danger in terms of security. I always found that people trusted native applications much more, but at the same time, there's also malware that's included in Android apps that don't come, for example, from the Play Store or side-loaded apps that you can get in there as well. And the bigger issue with this is a camera. Yes, you don't walk around it. You walk around the other side, and you don't stand in front of it. That's even worse.
No, back up,
Good.
back up.
We're streaming live on YouTube.
Go around. Sweetie, go around.
So sorry.
It's all good. There's a lot more opportunities to wreak proper havoc with your machine because you're outside of the security model of a browser. So, what do you think? Is there a chance that we can educate people more about the dangers of getting the right sources? Oh, fuck. Getting the right sources to download applications and not to trust just anything that can be downloaded?
It would be really nice if the review process of Apple, and I think there is one as well with Google Play, would sort of like whitelist or flag or security check. And maybe this is coming soon because it's becoming more and more of a problem. But we're constantly asked, how can I obfuscate my code? How can I protect my source code? How can I make my app undecryptable? How can I encrypt
that
my
was
stuff?
always a thing that fascinated me in HTML5 as well. I had a hard time selling HTML5 to people as a platform because they're like, yeah, but everybody can look at my source code. And I find this baffling because the source code to me is not what your app is about. Your app is about the interface, about the UX, about the data that goes in and the service it provides, and all of these can be copyrighted. All of these can be actually sued people over, whereas like over these 10 lines of source code that somebody can look at,
for sure.
you cannot sue. So the benefits of having open source technology in your system and releasing open source as a company yourself far outweigh that, like those efforts of trying to obfuscate your code and make it unreadable, especially as obfuscated code is actually not as performant as proper code either.
It's interesting because I was just at a conference and I'm trying to remember which one it was, but I think it was Open Source 101, and we were talking about how open source code is by nature more secure because more eyes are on it, more people are working towards this goal of making, so there's a check and balance. That's not necessarily the case with a completely closed ecosystem, so it's kind of an interesting concept. It's sort of like the opposite of what people are worried about.
Well, there are proven cases that any security issue in open source got fixed within a few hours, whereas like in closed source it takes sometimes up to months to get something done. I mean, I think our security team announced numbers that most hacked companies don't realize in the first 90 days. and then getting it fixed is another 2 to 3 months in a lot of cases.
Oh, yes, for sure.
Whereas, like, if your things are available, another issue I think also when it comes to native applications is that. The permissions model was always a big issue, that like you couldn't do permissions on demand, but you always have to ask for all permissions up front. So every app that you install wants access to everything in case they need it at a later stage.
Yeah.
And people don't seem to care and don't seem to read the like.
You know, you'd think that, but I think users are getting more savvy. I have an app called School Bell Weather. This is like a basic weather app, and it's for some reason it's being picked up by homeschool parents. And I had a mom email me saying, "Would you stop asking for my location? It's killing my battery." I was like, "Oh, okay," because I need to know their location to catch their weather. You know, to
Yeah.
tell them. It's basically telling the kids what to wear at 7 o'clock when they go out the door. So it's a very cute little app, but there's people are starting to talk to there's a more open dialogue between the users and the developers at this point. I find it really interesting and really healthy.
My two was an interesting one that was going around the last few months. Did you see that one where you get like anime eyes and
Oh, I
like
have
things
that
and
one,
like.
yes.
But did you
But
see
it's
the
totally
permissions that you gave it?
Yeah. I think I just gave it my bank account. Like,
Everything, like your
it's
call history, the access to your phone, it can delete
all
other apps.
all the camera. Yeah, I think they fixed that because so many people complained.
Yeah,
I think something happened like that. Like they locked some of that stuff down. But yeah,
but it seems a big problem that like catching people, guarding people. I mean, it's good that you see that something's happening, but it seems like educating people in this space is hard because there is an anti-pattern of people just saying yes to everything because we
just
got
hurry
so
up and
tired of
just
having to read it.
Yeah, it's the kind of a fatigue.
I like there was a startup in England that in their terms and conditions in the middle of the scrolling down to 6,000 pixels had like, if you can read this, call this telephone number, we give you £500. And it took 3 months for people
For
to find
someone
it.
to find it. Yeah.
It's fascinating to a degree. So in terms of native script and app development, my biggest problem with native apps compared to web apps and hybrid apps has always been the file size. Like you take for example Electron, it will always be 70 meg whatever you try because you have to get the whole of the Chromium in there and you get the whole. Or when we tried to make an embeddable Firefox, the biggest part of it was actually fonts
Yes,
to,
fonts are
to
always a
proper display these kind of things. So, is there a way to actually to do a more? I mean,
Slimmed down.
Google announced that quite a while ago that they want to do like more atomic updates, and they also do the instant apps that
Yes.
you load once and then they load the content on
app
demand.
thinning. I think on the iOS side there's app thinning.
Yeah.
I think. So this is something that's of great concern to all of the JavaScript to native frameworks because since we are a runtime or a bridge, there's a little bit extra on top that's making the translation between JavaScript to native. So what we are really hoping is that we can get an beautiful integration with Webpack and just pack, get rid of everything you don't need and just slim the heck down. And the Angular ecosystem, I think, is helping a little bit with that. We have, the tree shaking, the ahead of time compilation, the web packing. I'm hoping that this will become extremely seamless as we progress with the framework. So,
Do you
slim it
see
down.
do you see a movement from like old school things like big interfaces like when you had like IBM WebSphere and you had Oracle portals and then you had things like Microsoft whatever it was called, but these horrible frameworks in the browser that we had to use every day. Do you see a
Dashboard
movement
type
from
thing?
that to more like I mean, for example, in our expense system is one of those old SharePoint things that are just not fun to use,
Yes.
and we now replaced it with an app that basically is a larger download, but it's much more easier to use. Do you have a lot of enterprise clients that come to you that want to exchange those systems?
I think we're seeing more of these larger groups. I can't really name too many names, but they are looking for something usable, slimmed down, and easily updatable. So if they have their Angular code base, they can just continue to use that. And I think that people are paying more and more attention to usability. It's something like Workday, for example. It could be some horrible portal, but it's actually a nice, slim, nicely designed user interface that does the same work, and it's so much more pleasant. And I think that's becoming expected. People are a little out of patience with the giant dashboard scenario.
Do you think it's a form factor thing that people are more used to mobiles and tablets and that way expect simpler interfaces?
It could be that. It could also be, I think more and more people are using voice commands. I find myself using more and more trying to speak into my phone and get things done, using Alexa to do things, using chatbots. And all of those things are basically without any interface at all. There's no GUI at all. You're just speaking and things are happening. So I'm thinking this might be the wave of the future, which is interesting for us, actually.
It's interesting, but at the same time, I find it not scaling for larger companies. Like 300 people talking into a computer will not be possible.
On the other hand,
So
like
it feels very good in your own space at home and like when you're on the go with your phone. But as soon as there is other people around, like we just saw, sound is going to be a very terrible input device.
I think it's going to happen like if you've got people in the field, like or working on a farm, and they need to do something hands-free, that kind of thing. So like if you have a large corporation that has a lot of people, dispersed, and they need some kind of interface like that, that might be a good thing. But yeah, in this situation, it's not going to be great. You're going to be entering gibberish into your
What was the
watch.
feedback here? Did people like it? Did you get some good question? Did you get some question that you didn't expect?
No, I mean, I think I was very pleased with the reaction. I think a lot of people are looking for that opportunity to build their mobile app, and if they've bought into Angular, they immediately see the benefit. So, because they're looking at my code base as I'm building up my demo, which is QuickNotes, it's a recipe app, and they can see how similar it looks and how familiar it feels. It's like, with NativeScript, I can just Shazam, I've got a mobile app.
Excellent.
That's nice. The Shazam factor is all good.
Yeah, not saying that Shazam is not an app, but like.
Yes, it is.
So how does how do you see artificial intelligence coming into that? Like I talked earlier about chatbots with somebody else, and it seems like everybody expects them to be as clever as Cortana and Siri. We seem to
And Siri kind of sucks too, but I like
the hype
yeah.
that we build on that is that all machines are supposed to be much more intelligent, that we can build them easily. So do you think there is a way we can reverse that kind of hype and expectations just by building interfaces that make more sense rather than interfaces that are open to any input?
I mean, I think it's funny. I just read an article saying that chatbots are over. So
Yeah.
I think the hype may have caused a lot of people to jump in prematurely and expect too much, and now there's this tailing off, and it'll level out and mature. I think the chatbots will have a role in the future. Artificial intelligence is a different beast because we're talking about machine learning and that sort of thing. That's a heavy emphasis for my company actually as well. So we're trying to get our heads around this space. I think any way we can make our apps more cognitive or more smart, I think that's going to be intelligent to do.
Well, there are certain companies you can partner with.
Wait, I can't think who.
But yeah, it's an interesting one that we promised far too much for our end users in terms of marketing, and now we're having the trouble actually delivering it.
Of course, but I guess that's how you push technology forward.
Excellent.
Think
Well,
positive.
thanks very much, Jen.
Thanks so much. Nice to
That
chat
was
with
lovely.
you.
Nice to talk to
And
you.
we're not bots, so yeah. All right. There we go. Just leave this here.
All right. There's no rest for the wicked, so the next one is coming. You ready? Yeah. Can you do it first? Because we were supposed to do the 2:30 thing, so she here for that. Yeah.
I didn't know he'd already queued you up.
Yeah, she was the first one that we came up with that idea. So for the people watching, I mean, originally I just wanted to record a video with the next speaker for the Decoded Chats blog that I do for Microsoft. And then they told me like, oh, we got a live streaming thing, so you might as well do it with every speaker here. And now we're doing that. So we're going to get the recordings of this later, chop them up into pieces, and give them piecemeal the information out on the internet for everybody out there. So hopefully the break is over, so we won't have 10,000 people running past the camera anymore like we had before. So Kim,
Yes.
you gave the keynote at the first day here, and people were super excited. I just walked in from the flight completely tired, and I saw the energy that you were extruding on stage, and I was like, this was cool. This is the kind of speaker that I want to see. So you talked about mentoring mostly. So is it a good thing? No. So what do you think about is the mentoring to me is a very personal thing, and was used to be a very rare thing. But it seems like there's a whole market now, or a whole movement in our market that realizes the benefits of having a mentor structure inside your own company, and also getting external mentors in for your people.
Yes. A question?
Well, do you feel the same? Do you think that's the beginning of a movement, or is it still a hard sell for people to say like, hey, your people should have a mentor, not only a manager?
There's a definite movement on the people who desire to be mentored, formal and informal. Businesses aren't yet ready to see the benefit of it. They're and I come from a research background, so I've been looking at a lot of data, and it helps. So particularly when it comes to junior developers, everybody wants a senior developer, but every senior developer has a job that they want, and it's like you need to be able to bring in these juniors. Okay, so if it's going to take me a while to bring them up to speed so they're productive on the team, how do I best do that? And mentoring is a great model for doing that. It's not the only model, but it's a really great model. And what that does is not only does it help bring in the junior or the new person to the team and helps them acclimate to the culture of the organization, helps you pass on information. But during mentoring, that doesn't happen in, let's say, a training program. Training programs have a strict outline, they follow this thing, and then maybe you test something. When you're mentoring, there are a lot of unknown things or unwritten things that the senior will know and be able to tell or be able to identify by working with someone that don't come up in training. So mentoring is a great strategy for helping to acclimate people to culture, getting juniors ready. Because most juniors, if you're coming out of boot camp or doing an online course, as I said in my thing, 69% of people are self-taught. How do they learn about real development? How do they learn how to quickly and efficiently put up a dev environment in your organization? How do they learn how to communicate bug fixes or all these other things or these unknown things about culture in your organization? Those things come from mentoring. So again, it doesn't have to be formal, it can be informal, but formal mentoring allows for, as I was talking about in my presentation, allows for the leadership to put in benchmarks. Because if it's not demonstratable, if it's not measurable, then people don't. Mentoring is really, it's not tangible. It's this
That's the
thing.
prejudice about it, isn't it? Like we put mentors in place where we assign people to mentors or we let them find them, and hopefully we find some talent in the person that we didn't know, which is a great outcome from mentoring that I find. But then it's like, okay, how do we measure that? Like if the engineer has been on a client case for like 16 hours, we can get money for that. If the junior engineer has been spending 3 hours with a mentor in the last month, what came out of that and what's the long-term goal?
And those are the intangibles that when you're when people are thinking about business outcomes, it can't just be dollars and cents because, well, it comes down to dollars and cents, but it can't be immediate dollars and cents. When you've acclimated someone to your culture through mentoring, because mentoring is done in relationships, people are less likely to leave your companies, which reduces turnover and reduces then the HR process of training, recruiting, that whole thing. So that's one measurable return on investment. It also helps in a mentor environment, again, with the relationship, when mentees feel safe to make mistakes, they're more they're quickly go ask for help instead of sitting there all day beating their heads up and afraid to ask for help for something, and they've wasted hours. And then a mentor can say, okay, these kind of problems I need you to figure out on your own. These kind of problems, if you've worked on it for 30 minutes, an hour, you're still not getting anywhere, those are the kind of problems you need to bring to the team so we can brainstorm that kind of thing. No one learns that on their own. That's something that only somebody who's in the culture can understand those things. And then that is a product of the ROI because now I'm not wasting 5 hours on something when I could have been being more productive.
An interesting one is also that like the best talent that I always managed to get was word of mouth with talent that I already hired. So somebody who feels appreciated in a company by having
Yes.
a mentor program is more likely to talk to their very talented friends to come
And
into
then you
as
don't have to
well.
pay for recruiting fees and all these other things.
And you don't get the professional developers that are professionally asking for perks rather than asking for staying in a company for a
Exactly.
few years.
Exactly.
An interesting one though is, and I just was invited to talk on a panel about diversity and in our market, and I pointed out the biggest problem is that we're in this hype world where we're like the investment bankers of the 80s now. Like everybody has to deliver 100%. Everybody needs to be a rock star developer. Everyone needs a 10 times developer, whatever that is. And the average assumption is that people stay in a company for one tops 2 years. And I find this ridiculous because that means our market is not maintainable
Exactly.
or actually future facing at all. All we do is burn out people and discard them.
Yeah, and is not an efficient and effective model, particularly when every day somebody has a great idea and wants to do some company that touches tech some kind of way, and so there are developers that will be needed for that. So it's like this increasing need for people to be in these jobs, in these positions as developers, and they can't burn out. I mean, this is not social work. This is not education where teachers burn out on. This is a well-paying job where I should be able to, as an organization, you should be able to come up with strategies so that everybody benefits, and it's not just about money. And a lot of it is about culture. And if people I mean, there'll be people who are just jumping for money, but that's not the majority of people. Most people want to be in an environment which sustains them. And this is not about being a socialist or government. It's not in politics. People just want a quality of life. And when people feel that the organizations they're with care about them, they are more able to be involved anyway. And I just read this research study, and I don't have the documentation right now, but it was about because my doctoral study is about strategies that successful software engineers use to mentor junior software engineers. And one of the areas I'm looking at is disengagement, or employees that are not engaged. They cause more cost to the business than an effective mentoring program, because they're taking unpaid, I mean, they're taking sick leave, unpaid time off. They don't, I mean, they're not engaged. They're on the jobs and they're really not doing anything. And the data was that $11 billion a year is spent with turnover on these employees. What if they had a mentor and got engaged in your company and felt that they belonged, that their contribution mattered? Again, it's not 100%. It's not going to work for everybody, because there's some people, somebody tells them, $1,000 more, they're going to leave. But the majority of people want to be engaged. That goes back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People want to feel they matter and their work matters. And when you bring in new talent, and again, it's not just young people. People various ages are coming to this. When someone comes to you and they've had 20 years of experience in corporate America or something, doing something, that's a trade-off. That's a barter. You're not getting a junior. You're getting somebody who might not understand code well and needs help with that, but they have some skills that can really help your business, and that's how people need to be looking at it.
Would you agree that if we focused more on these kind of social interactions and to build a more supporting environment, that more diversity would be a normal outcome of that?
Um, and it has to be intentional, yes. Because one of the things when people talk about underrepresented and bringing in women and people of color, you have to first of all be in these communities. They have to see themselves as being able to do this. Most people in my life are amazed by what I'm doing, and I don't consider myself a developer. I found my niche where I can speak tech to non-techies. I can be in that middle space, but most people see themselves as only consumers. That's the majority of people. And so the people that I find often are the people, oh, I had a Commodore, we need more people than that. So we need to expose more people. Just come into their communities and talk about what code is. And then once people say, oh, that's what that is, that's one reason that computational thinking to me is very important. Because if I can share with someone, okay, this is what computational thinking is. Let's say you go into a grocery store and you pick up an apple. That apple's a variable. They just gave it the name apple. You have a cart. It's an object. You're putting things in your cart. That's an object. You're going around. That's a loop. Just really basic stuff, and letting people see it's not that foreign. These are things you're doing every day. People are like, oh, I think I can, yeah, this matters to me. But when you look at the majority of communities, I didn't grow up with a computer. Majority of us don't grow up with computers. Only reason I decided to get into this was because I knew I had an affinity for tech that was beyond just being a consumer, was really interested in it. And a lot of people would, but they don't. I didn't see myself as a producer of it. I didn't see myself as it being a job. It was just something that I was interested in. It could maybe be a hobby.
It's interesting that prejudice goes both ways. I'm working with All-Star Code in New York right now that goes to Latino and Black communities and goes to high schools and also other schools directly talking to kids about careers in IT, what is a possibility. And there is a lot of animosity of people that go into the program from their friends who see like a career in sports a much more obvious choice.
Yes.
So there's a lot of like, well, why are you hanging out with those guys? It's not at all our crowd. So it's kind of weird that that prejudice in communities or in the culture brought up this tribalism that actually forces us to find people in between that can communicate between these different levels as well.
Yeah.
And it's an uphill battle, but I find it incredibly exciting because
Yeah.
I can just see the immense potential of somebody with a background like that who doesn't grow into a consuming computer society, but actually wants to see it as a maker, as something that they haven't done before. There's lots of potential that way.
And that's another reason I'm working with some people on the spectrum. I have a group that I call it the Spectrum Codes, because there are a few Fortune 500 companies like SAP that has an initiative that 1% of their developers will be on the spectrum.
Ours as well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And
Yeah.
so because I'm a certified special needs teacher, it always frustrated me to have students who could benefit from these kind of jobs, but because social services, the people they go to for help, don't understand these things, they're not guided into this. They're stacking groceries, that kind of thing. And so one of the things I'm doing, I have 4 individuals now who are on the spectrum, and we're working with getting them coding skills and also helping them with their social skills, and hopefully being able to have a conversations with potential employers about how to interview someone like this. You can't shoot questions off at a person like this. I was talking to Eric, who spoke today and who's here, who's a closure guy, and we had lunch today, and I was saying the interview would be different for them is instead of bringing them in the one shot, bring them in a few times, have them just sit with some developers, pass them some kind of, hey, I'm having this problem. What do you think about that? That's a different way of interviewing them. And I don't think it should be a different way to interview any newbie. Giving people whiteboard tests and all that, it's kind of stressful. And so it
It's also
really just,
useless. It gives you the wrong talent.
you're not solving problems. And that's what I tell people. You're hired as a developer to solve problems. And so this helps you demonstrate that, help them see where your levels are. Again, coming from a education background, coming from a training background, if it's not measurable, it's really hard to do anything. I like to see. I like to demonstrate. You have to demonstrate to me. Don't tell me you know something. Demonstrate your knowledge.
That is the biggest problem. I mean, when I'm coaching people and I'm using workshops, there's always quizzes at the end, not like a here's your final paper,
Yeah.
but like I just want to know that people understood what I was doing, because otherwise I could fool myself into thinking I've
Yes.
done a great workshop, and it feels fluffy, it feels warm, but it doesn't mean that I actually changed somebody or helped somebody with the course, and they paid money for it. They're gonna get
And
something
that's
out
what's
of it.
happening that I see in boot camps.
Yeah.
There's a lot of either they go really wide with the breadth where they cover everything, or they really go deep in a stack, but there's no opportunity to practice. There's no opportunity to make mistakes. There's no opportunity for collaboration. Those are not enough of that, so that when they're not in that environment where somebody's there to answer them, help them ask questions when they're by themselves and start, they don't know where to start. There's not enough practice. There's not enough. There's nothing measurable. And one of the solutions I talk about is project-based learning. Again, coming from education, or project-based learning. So let's say you get someone comes to you and says, "I want to learn development." Well, that's not measurable. So let's break this down into some measurable parts. So what are you talking about? So, I like design. Okay, so if you like design, that leads me to thinking maybe UX, UI. What do we need? What kind of skills you need for that? Okay, so you definitely need HTML, CSS. So as somebody who's never even doesn't even know what a variable is or whatever, first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with HTML. We're not even going to talk about how it works. I'm going to give you a document. Here are some tags. I'll start with just a few tags. Tag that up based on the definitions of what I showed you, or the examples you've seen, these tags. Now come back and explain to me why you put those tags on there.
I used Word for that. I said use the styling in Word, like paragraphs, headings, and then use the tags accordingly. So you understand that you're structuring content here. You're not coding yet, but you're structuring content. That's the first step of doing it. it's what do you think about? I'm a massive open source guy, and Microsoft hired me from a massive organization to get into that space more as well. And I find it fascinating that you can use an open source project. And one of my favorite interview questions is like, when would you not fix a bug? And one of the best questions, there's several good answers to that. And I think one of them is these beginner bugs, that when you find something in your project that is really easy to fix, and that is not crucial to fix and would cost you like 12 seconds of your time, but instead you flag it up as a beginner bug that goes into the project, and people start fixing something and learning the structure of the project by fixing that one thing, and already having a positive experience by putting something into the project.
Exactly.
And there's a good opportunity in open source to get people into our market
Well,
that way.
I have a website called Junior Dev Mentoring, and so it is a Ruby project, a Rails project, and then I started a Slack channel for the Junior Dev Mentoring. And so since I started the Slack channel, because I went to Great Wide Open last year, and that was the first experience I had of open source, and I was like, I really want to open source this project. And so in that time, in the year, now the team has moved it from my personal GitHub. It's on an organizational GitHub, and we have newbie issues, and we're looking for more, because I agree with you, and I've been saying this, that Hoodie was a great opportunity for that, and some Charlotte, who does my first pull request. So what we're doing is now curating newbie friendly issues, so that it gives mentors and mentees projects to work on together. So that if you pull one from Junior Dev Mentoring, or you pull one from Hoodie or whatever, now this is a project you can work with somebody, and it's tangible, it's measurable, and it's not that kind of thing. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
There's some interesting concepts. I'm mentoring a few people right now, and my challenges that I find is like from top down, I get the input, but there's in a large corporation, when you start putting a mentoring framework in there, there's middle managers then that assign people with far too much work that they get time to actually benefit from the mentoring that they get. Because I mentor them on public speaking, so I want them to try out new materials and write outlines and these kind of things, but they don't get the time for doing it. And it's a very tough place to. The larger the corporation, it seems, the more opportunities for people to work against you as a mentor.
And that goes back to, again, organizational culture.
Yeah.
Because and so going back to my research topic, the theory or the lens that I'm looking at it through is learning organization, which is an organization that is a part of it. It's about taking the knowledge and skills that we learn individually, bringing them together and how can we innovate based on this? How can we change based on this? And those kind of organizations are better supported for mentoring. Now, it doesn't mean that other organizations aren't, but that has to come from leadership. Leadership has to understand that mentoring is a relationship and it takes time. And if you value that, you will put in space and time for bottom line. It's not lip service. You can't say, oh, we want mentoring, and then don't provide the resources for it. And that's just if they want them to be better speakers, then provide them the time to practice those skills, to be able to meet with their mentor, and not make it an obstacle to mentoring. Yeah.
One big thing I find, especially in the startup space, is like we talk about non-social skills in companies, non-empathetic companies, and I find it fascinating how many companies get millions of dollars of investment to build products, and then they outsource their HR. Or they pay their HR people so terribly that they have a churn of like 2 months in HR. And if these are the departments that I reach out to when things go wrong, and these are the friends that I should have. And if these friends are strangers, or if these friends are people that I don't even have time to start a relationship with before they're gone again, do you think there's ways that our market needs to change, and how we can make people understand the value of these kind of social parts of a company?
Again, with everything, not with everything, that's but with most things, it comes down to money. And one of the conversations I have had is, how do you educate venture capitalists on the importance of making sure, because you just can't throw money at a problem, because it's wasting your money. You're investing to get a return on your investment. How can you create a situation where you get more bang for your buck, because you require that these things are in order. You require the data. Why is your turnover so high? What's going on? Then if your turnover is so high, then you owe us some money back or something. I mean, there has to be accountability because when there isn't, and this goes back to the diversity issue. When there's an all-white boys club and people just have money, there's some it's just spending money. You know, why I don't need to be empathetic. I have this money. I can do whatever I want to. This is my business. There are people, and there are people who have great business ideas. But to be a leader takes time and cultivation, and that needs to be mentored. And so, just because you're a CEO of a company does not mean that you're a leader at all.
Oh, or even a public speaker or even a public figure.
Exactly. And so, and that does not make you a great manager.
Hmm.
And so HR and those soft skill departments that you're outsourcing because you don't see a need for them because they cost you money. Again, when I go back to what we talked about before, there are a lot of intangibles or what seem intangibles that are great for your return on investment. Because every time you lose somebody, that means you have to go through the process of vetting other people, and that costs money.
Hmm. I find it sometimes funny when you go in your career and you become better. I always hired people that are better than me technically because I want them to take over from me,
Hmm.
so I can do other things in the future. And I moved far away from the developer that I used to be by being able to do other things like public speaking, like mentoring, like sitting in meetings and saying like, no, we cannot do this before we even start coding it and
Yeah.
wasting time on it. But there is a lot of like peer pressure in the community itself that if you're not coding 24/7, then you're actually one of those sales guys we don't want to talk
Yeah.
to. It reminded me of the punk scene. I used to be in a punk band, and we got a bit successful, and all of a sudden people didn't like us anymore because now you're like a sellout, and you're like,
Yeah.
well, yesterday you loved us. What's going
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah.
So, do you think there is we have a problem that our community is just too young and too high schooly cliquish to break that?
Well, you can't blame it on them because this industry's been around for years. So it's just it's you
It's
have
about 60 years. It's not
yeah,
much.
I mean, but you have the old guys who just don't want to change.
Yeah.
You have the young guys who are in a culture or grew up in a generation where they could do no wrong. They show up, they get a prize. If there was ever issue, their parents handled it for them. A lot of them don't have very bad coping skills. They don't understand how mistakes, how to come back from mistakes or failures. Um, and so that when you talk about diversity, when you talk about bringing women in, when you're talking about bringing cultures in who have already experienced or daily basis experience these kind of things, it's a challenge for them to come in there and feel safe. Um, but it can be done. But it comes from you have to have a desire to be a better mentor, to be a better leader, to be a better manager, and being able. And because one of the things I talk about in my presentation, self-assessment is key. Because if you don't assess or you have a false identity or false sense of how great you are, when no one around you is able to tell you, hey, dude, this is not working,
Yeah.
then that cycle continues. So then I mean, it's that's why I like the space that I'm in because I'm not connected to anybody, so I can just be honest. This is what I see. So yesterday, someone here at the conference came up to me and said, "Oh, thank you for your talk on mentoring. Are there any online things for that my team could use for mentoring?" And so that's what people's first thing because everything needs to be online, everything needs to be web based. And so I was like, "So tell me more about your problem." And I was like, I mean, I could come in and do something very specific to your needs. But as I'm talking to him, it's you're in and this is things that HR would have identified. You don't have a mentoring problem. What you have is as a leader who is not empathetic and is rude and is a butthole to people. That's what that is. And so I don't care how much mentoring you do, it's not going to work.
So it's the fish thing that things from the head.
Exactly. And that's where culture comes. Culture comes from the head.
Yeah. So would you say that something like affirmative action is something that can or is necessary to force change in a certain way? That you get people in higher positions from more diverse backgrounds rather than like trying to make your workforce more diverse from the ground up.
The thing with affirmative action, okay, that's a political thing, and it's proven. I'm African American.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest. Being black and female in tech has been a win for me. I mean, I can check off two boxes: underrepresented and two things. So I mean, it works for me. But the reason, and I say this because affirmative action it becomes very politicized. You know, you're discriminating against us. What it does is not many people who benefited from affirmative action did not have to go in and bust their butts twice as hard as the next man to get to the next level. So it's not like they're coming in and not doing anything, but it gives them it opens the door. And it also forces you not to close the door on them.
Yeah.
So once given the opportunity, but again, even that's a political thing. Why should I force you as a business owner or organizational leaders when when it is proven that for you to create products for everybody, you don't have my perspective. You cannot
Yeah.
create great products for feminine hygiene. I'm sorry, it's just not going to
I
happen.
seriously like the internal training that we have on diversity. Is not about like here's not what to do and here's how people are different from you like others are that I had to encounter before. But ours was basically showing a product that failed, and then how the product team became more diverse and redesigned it with different needs for different people and made it a success that way.
Yes.
I think that is a much more beautiful story to tell
Exactly.
and exactly reality story to tell. It fascinates me that products like Pinterest are 90% women and the most of the engineering team is men again on that. Or let's not get into politics, what's happening
Yeah.
right now here, but the people who make laws against about female issues, basically none of them being women, is just ridiculous. But it's what I found disheartening though, and that might just be me from the outside trying to do too much at the right time, is that I've got lots of mentees that are basically women speakers, and then they get invited to conferences, and their first reaction, gut reaction, is like, they invited me because I'm a woman, not because I'm a speaker that is interesting to them. So that is a real concern that like as a man you never have kind of thing. So it's a real problem that in society it's like it seems like there's a rooted problem that like he only asked me because of this and that and not like, hey, cool, I got asked, I'm doing it.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
a
yeah.
how can we make this attitude different?
And those are some because I also do a speaker series for our Atlanta Women Who Code group, and those are some conversations they talked about. Do you want to be? Would you rather be brought in as a because you're a woman or because of a great topic? I guess I'm going to go from affirmative action. I want to get in. And I'm not speaking for anything else. So I appreciate being black and female because again, I check off two boxes. And so when I get in, people are like, "Oh, she can really her presentations are really good. Oh, I mean, this, that, and the
So
other."
you let
So
your actions speak against the
yes,
prejudice, so to say.
and that's how people have been doing affirmative action for years.
Yeah.
Just let me in the door. Trust me, I'll knock the doors off.
I had the same with like people were like, "Oh, I'm not going to go to a conference, but that speaker is speaking because I don't agree with what he's saying." And I'm like, "Actually, I want to be there. I want to be the next speaker to counteract some of the things that that person has been saying, instead of just letting that thing go and like him having the audience and nobody bringing the counterpart of it." So there is opportunities for people out there, but by just saying like, you know what, it doesn't matter why I was invited, but I'm going to make a great job out of
That's
it. And then next time I get invited because I'm me and not because I'm that person.
And I tell people I am, if you don't get anything else from me, I am the walking embodiment of what it meant 2 years ago to make a decision to change I mean, I left my career. I did not know much about tech except for the things that I enjoyed. Started speaking just last year and spoke at my first conference was at Scotland JS, and so much positive feedback. It started this ball rolling, and that was just June. It hasn't even been a year yet, and so it's possible. It's when you get in there, you have to show them. You know, I don't have to tell you, and that's my. I don't have to tell you anything. I want to again. It goes back to demonstration. I'm going to demonstrate to you my level of knowledge. I don't have to tell you anything.
Well, you just did, so thanks very much. That
Thank
was
you.
great. Cool. We have a next speaker already lined up. This is going here like, I feel like I'm in a saloon door that's just rolling around. Okay. Any any of them? Are you okay? Do you have to? Does he have to fly later, or does he have to present, or?
He has to present.
When?
20 minutes. It's not enough time. Don't worry.
Okay, no worries then. Sorry about that.
Cool.
And we're live again. Well, we're live the whole time, but here we got the next speaker of JazzCon here in New Orleans, and it's a local. We met in New York, and you introduced me at one of my talks at a conference at Halfstack, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And now I'm here to introduce Jared Sands to you, who just gave his talk like half an hour ago or something,
True.
the last one. You were talking about testing.
Yes.
And what did you try to tell people about that they didn't know yet? What was the main thing that people like? Wow, we didn't know that you taught us.
Well, there was obviously yesterday was the announcement of Angular 4. So before getting into the topic, I tried to do a small plug for new features in Angular 4. Which is one of big announcement that we had in the Angular community yesterday. So I thought it was a good idea to just add that. And then for the testing, I wanted to cover mainly some areas from Jasmine, which is one of the test runners that is most used in Angular. And I wanted to introduce a spice. So this will allow you to create some different behaviors from the APIs that you want to unit test, and then after that I cover different Angular, more specific to Angular. So I covered how to test services and then how to test components, which covers most of the areas around
Sorry to
testing.
interrupt just a second. We had someone on the Twitter feed say that your lanyard is
Rubbish.
messing with the microphone.
Okay, let's take the lanyard off.
Yeah,
How about
just take it
that?
off.
People know me.
So you could,
Okay, okay.
it's causing a crackling or rustling sound on the microphone.
Okay, sorry about the crackle.
Snap, crackle, pop.
Like the craggle, like in the Lego movie.
Okay.
You see, it's very professional here. Like we got just randomly people coming in and playing with our microphones. I hope that works now better. It made me feel unconscious, self-conscious about my microphone. It's going to be interesting. So, different component level testing, different testing. When it comes to components, there's a lot of error cases that are possible. Like a component renders nicely up front. I remember I think it was Facebook that had a system called Chaos Monkey that just randomly puts random content into things and shifts things around and resizes font sizes while it's doing it, and then measuring the quality of that. Do you think something like that is a good measure to actually go there, or is when it comes to hierarchy of testing, what would you say are the most important tests, and what are the ones that are nice to have?
So, well, it will depend on the application, on the actual application. So, some application that has a lot of user interaction, maybe it will be a good candidate for this tool that is just trying some crazy, UI, like clicking around and messing around with your UI. For some line of business application, maybe it's more boring. It won't be finding any corner cases, so it won't really improve the quality of the product. So it just depends. I mean, you need to adapt your test to your actual scenario. And then some applications will have intensive use of the UI. Maybe there will be a lot of interactions. You want to test that. Sometimes it will be more user. Usually, this user input. This is a little bit tricky. Sometimes you can, catch a lot of, with regular expressions. Sometimes it will be just some input that you don't expect. Not even the developer knows that you can maybe try some strange input. So yeah, it's good to bring other people other than developers. So if you are trying to get better quality, it's usually a good idea to have a dedicated team which is not related to the development team. That will bring some, fresh eyes.
It always angered me that Q&A people are not seen as worthy as developers in our market, and it's even reflecting in how much they get paid. But good QA people that I worked with at places like Yahoo and Mozilla as well, they were technically savvy. They knew coding, they knew where things came from. They also knew how to break things. And
Of
they also
course.
knew how to communicate to developers how they broke things and make it work. So it seems to be a very undervalued skill in our market.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, it's really important. I mean, everything that you don't catch, a mistake. It could be a small mistake. It could be, a minor thing, but this is impacting, the final users, and it will depend, how many people is using your app. That could be a disaster. That could be maybe on the hundreds of people just facing that annoying issue, and it will make the experience much worse. And this is something that you can fix with just doing the proper testing. So I would say that they are quite important for quality purposes. But then maybe it's true that as the industry, they are not really valued. I think they are mostly seen as something that you should have, but then it goes down to human resources, and then it's kind of lost, in the different layers of management, and they just hire some quality assurance, individuals, and then sometimes you have a good fit, sometimes maybe it's not as good.
Well, sometimes it's even outsourced to other companies. That's what I see a lot of people do, which kind of is interesting because they will not come up with tests that you expect because they're not close to the project.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it just makes it like the most common denominator. It makes it the simple cases that have to be ticked off because most of the time they get paid by the hour or paid by project. So they
True.
just make sure they deliver the most important things first so they can get more clients to actually use. Do you think that in when it comes to your architecture of your application and the architecture of your solutions, that having a dedicated like Jasmine or a dedicated QA flow protects this a bit as well because it shows that like that QA is a large part of your project and that it should be done by experts inside your company as well.
Yeah, I would recommend to have a dedicated team in your company. I guess that's the best because then you get them to know how you do things. They will focus on the things that you want to stress more, and if it's externalized, then maybe you will lose some of that. And then maybe you will then hire another team for another phase of the same project, or who knows. I mean, these are only needed required before some major release, so they may come and go, and then a lot of this knowledge is lost.
Hmm.
So yeah, I would recommend to have an internal team. And then there's a funny thing when depending on how you structure your test, it can also impact development. So you can also have changes on the actual architecture coming from the test, because having one or another architecture can make tests much more explode in size, for example. So you want to maybe take also this feedback from tests that will make development or the architecture change. That's also another option.
How common is test-driven development in your environment where you work with people? And do you think there is a danger of that when developers do their own unit tests before they write the code, that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than like that it's tests that are representing what will happen afterwards?
There are many. I mean, there are many steps until you get a finished product. So what will happen is that unless there's someone taking care of this process, and usually this is a quality assurance manager or someone that is responsible, you will get just bits. Maybe if the developer has good TDD culture, you will have those. If the developer, if it's open to the developer, he may decide not to not to write so many tests as he will be required, but some responsible person just following through. So it can be a little bit, a miss and match. The best thing is to make one person accountable in the team, and then that person will push everyone to just keep the task done. But but yeah, the thing is, depending how the culture is in your team and also in your company, that will be much easier. If there is some budget for it, then you will have the time. If you don't have the budget or the support from your team manager, maybe you have to do it, at the same time that you are also building new features, which will impact on the test because you will maybe skip some of those just to keep the progress.
Yeah, and
So
of course, new parts of the new functionality deals with new tests, and maybe means you have to put other tests in already existing functionality because the new functionality changes that or adds to it.
and then is also the culture. So if you are in I come also from an enterprise background. So I was a .NET C# developer for a long time, and in those environments is the culture. The company won't allow a project not having proper tests. But the tests are not open for the developer to decide what are these tests. You will also get a list of, um, like quality requirements, and you need to make sure these are met. And then there will be someone checking this, and it won't progress from that moment. In front end, I don't think that you see that much of that, process being used. I guess it changes from industries, and
Hmm.
also front end. It also depends which front end. What's the final product? Is that finance? Is that? I mean, different industries changes quite a lot.
Well, there's even, especially when you talk about finance, I find it always very frustrating as a front-end web developer that there's so many laws that you have to fulfill in interfaces. Sometimes you have to make much more complex interfaces because of a legal requirement. Like, for
Okay.
example, there's some finance laws that you have to have a fixed font size in some things in England,
Oh wow.
or you're not allowed to use normal input elements because they might have a keylogger on them. So you have to use an on-screen keyboard to type things in. So
Oh no.
there's all kind of weird things happening. Do you think there is a compliance opportunity in that one that you could automate something like that in the Q&A process as well, or is this something that's
Um,
up to the final? Well, first the designer to do it, and then for the implementer to make sure that it's there.
It's good. It's good that there's some process. I mean, usually the people that has been participating on the design, they can do this much faster because they have a clear idea of what is supposed to happen in different. I mean, for example, when you work with the UX team, they have the interactions internalized, so they will know, for example, what should happen when you hover a control. It should trigger some different layout. It should show some you know other information, contextual information. But from a developer perspective, you can miss these details very easily. And unless the designer goes back and check exactly what happened, what was the final implementation, it will be lost because nobody knows in so much detail what's expected, what's supposed to happen. Even when you bring quality assurance teams, because they are not involved in that design, like the user interactivity, they will miss these details because also the designers don't go and produce the documents with all the actual, one by one broken down
Well,
of.
which is also impossible in an agile environment. I mean, when you
Yeah,
do
it's
user testing, when you do like sprints with real user testing in between, you find out about new things, and then the information changes. This is a very living a process that we
must be
follow,
faster.
and these are the best interfaces in the end. So it's the waterfall principle of designing something and then throwing it over to the developer
Yeah.
is luckily enough probably dead and outside of enterprise, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
so when it comes to the Angular 4 announcement, which are the main changes in Angular that got you really, really excited,
Um,
that you learned about, that you had to share with the audience?
Yeah, so the main one, it's been the effort from the Angular core team to reduce the bundle size. So this has been a long effort. Like probably from the last year, one of the main worries it was that it was too bloated. It was just too big, the end bundle, and this will impact in initial load and in other aspects. Quite important not only for web, but then if you want to use it, for example, in mobile applications, that's also relevant. And now because Angular can be used in either on desktop, mobile, or web, that's very important. And I've seen some numbers, some figures, and it's sometimes 60% smaller, which is quite a lot. And this is a change that now is available on Angular 4.
So how does it do that? Does it do it by diffing? Does it do it by packing? Does it do it by linting and seeing which parts you use and not include the ones that you don't use? Because that's what we do with Webpack on the web. So I wondered if
So what happens in the way Angular is architecture is that we need to render the actual templates for the different components, and also because of change detection, we have some specific logic that has been fine-tuned for the JavaScript runtime that runs on the browser, and this has been done by the Angular team for quite a few time. We have used what is called a just-in-time compilation, so it will just get the templates for each component, do that in runtime, try to find out the JavaScript that will work best on the JavaScript engine, and then add this fine-tuning change detection logic that will make the re-render only apply only the re-render in specific cases. So it's you are saving some time there and making the application faster.
so this is very specific to V8 or is it to several JavaScript
Oh
engines
no,
out there?
that's in general.
Okay, because I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can do that be optimized in Chakra Core as well to allow you to pre-render and cache things that a lot of developers didn't do. And I always said like libraries and frameworks are exactly where we should optimize that. I'm actually pretty happy that
Yeah, yeah,
this is
no.
happening now because most developers that use Angular don't understand how a browser is rendering things and don't want to care. But the framework should sort it out for them, and it
Yeah,
seems
yeah.
there's a case that's happening now.
There's actually a document that everybody can see. It's a public document where one member of the team, I think it's Tobias Bosch, is explaining exactly how it's working. And you can see some of the code. And it's even, I mean, the previous version in Angular 2 was quite good still, but you couldn't follow what was going on. I mean, the APIs were not so clear. Now in Angular 4, you can actually follow the code, and maybe you could also try to change it and try to refactor it a little bit.
How much of that is breaking changes to the original version? Because that was a big thing with Angular
Oh
1 to
yeah.
Angular 2, isn't it? Are we facing this again that a lot of old things cannot be upgraded because they would break?
Well, that's something that has changed for better. So now, one thing that the Angular team put some effort was in Angular 2 final was the semantic versioning. So the semantic versioning is making these fixed releases every 6 months, and then that's why we are seeing this Angular 4, and then we are planning Angular 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. And this is a way for the Angular team to say, look, within this 6 months window, we are not going to introduce any breaking changes. But even when they increase the major version, like is this case today with Angular
I wonder if
4,
there's like going to some
they
other room
just
right now.
deprecated like one or two APIs. There's almost a drop in. It will just work. It's really, really easy. The migration, steps. So, for example, for the version today, it was just two APIs that were changing, and it was just a name change. But they were really low level, so it won't affect almost anyone.
Excellent. What was feedback that you got here at the conference that excited you? Did you meet somebody that had a really good question that you didn't expect, or did you find the audience quite responsive to what you're doing?
Oh no, the thing is, obviously, when you cover a topic, the thing is, unit testing, there's not much information around it.
Hmm.
So there will be, pieces of the information, but you won't have all of the information in one place. And this is something that I wanted to do with unit testing. Now it's a little bit better. At the time I started writing a blog post, and now today it's kind of the talk version of that blog post, which is unit testing guide, I call it, and that's covering a lot of the scenarios. Now today we have this covered by the official documentation, but still it's good, as a community, it's good that there are as many resources as possible. Because some people just don't go to the official documentation, I don't know why. Some people prefer to read that on a blog post. And it's good that there are as many resources as possible. So some guys just reach me out and after the session and say, "Oh, this is perfect. I'm just doing exactly this in my application, and it was just exactly what I needed." So it's good. It's good to see that people is just using that information and it's making a good synergy, so they can go back home and or back work and use that what I show them.
Excellent. Well, thanks very much. I hope you
Yeah,
had a
no
good time,
worries.
and I hope you have a good flight back tomorrow, like I do as well.
Yeah, thank you
See you
very
then.
much. It was a pleasure.
I can do another one. So, you're the token local?
Yes, I'm the local talker.
Excellent. So, what did you present and what do you do?
I presented ClojureScript,
Oh, nice.
and I compared it to JavaScript. Some of the issues with JavaScript that come up all the time, like module systems and dead code elimination. Just this showing in how in ClojureScript those are not such a problem. Like my main mission was to reach out to the lispers, like the people who didn't know that they could do this professionally now, and let them know that there's a real professional grade functional programming language that's being used and people are being paid to do it. So
It is a very interesting thing. I work on TypeScript and with the TypeScript team as well. And in my talk, in my JavaScript keynote, I said the same thing, that there is a great opportunity that if you don't like JavaScript, you don't like the nature of it, that to work on something like ClojureScript or
right,
TypeScript gives you the opportunity to show off your talent and still make that
still
uh,
be in
uh,
the browser or
yeah, and still make that community benefit from it because you actually see JavaScript as a compilation target
right,
rather than as a language in itself.
right.
The problem, of course, is how it is maintained over the years. I mean, like there's CoffeeScript, there's NativeScript, there's TypeScript, there's
Mhm.
there were many. There were like SaneScript, SoundScript at one time, and
Yeah.
LiveScript. A lot of them come and go, and it's a matter of is it worthwhile putting your effort into it and learning it?
Right. Right.
So
Well, ClojureScript has been around for 6 years,
yeah.
which is just a little less than CoffeeScript. Um, so I don't think it's going anywhere. Like in terms of just disappearing, it's got a huge user base. Like basically anyone doing Clojure on the back end wants to do ClojureScript on the front end, and it's growing. So I think that it's safe to jump into ClojureScript.
It's interesting. Sometimes there's a kind of a tear between the standards being defined and the and solutions like that pushing the standard ahead.
Right.
Like Java, CSS is a great example. We had Sass, we had Less that has all
Mhm.
the functionality that people expect, like variables, mixins, and these
Sure,
kind of things
nested
that
stuff. Yeah.
CSS still doesn't have yet.
Right.
And to a degree, it kind of slowed down the evolution of CSS itself.
Right, because you didn't need it anymore. There wasn't that pressing need to
Yeah,
have them.
but
Yeah.
the benefit, of course, is that in a meta language like ClojureScript or TypeScript, you can do breaking things that you cannot do in JavaScript because the older browsers will never be able to execute it. Whereas like
Right.
a compiled language going into JavaScript can push things
Right.
that the language would not be able to do because of backwards compatibility.
That's right. Like the Clojure script compiles to like old school JavaScript. Like that's very backwards compatible. It uses the Google Clojure compiler, which has a bunch of polyfills for going way back in the browsers. Um, so yeah, it's nice because it's JavaScript you would never want to write. It's like really boring old school JavaScript, but it's a compiler, so it's just gonna do it for you.
One of the dangers, of course, is that you're not writing the code that you're executing. So, in terms of performance of your application, in the end, you might run into weird things that you cannot trace back to where it comes from. And also, there's the problem of like when there's a JavaScript error in your final application, which was
Yeah.
the Clojure script line that caused
Right,
it.
right.
That's where source mapping comes in, I
Right,
guess.
right. ClojureScript has source mapping that goes. You can like see exactly what line in your ClojureScript the error was on. It's true that stack traces and stuff are not as clean as you would want, but a ClojureScript function is just a JavaScript function. So at some point, it's you can do the translation in your head and you see what's going on.
Hmm. What are big implementations that are using ClojureScript? I thought Gmail was done in it, wasn't it?
Gmail is done with the Google Closure compiler.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest application I believe that is using the Google Closure compiler. But Gmail is really big, like in terms of user base and like the browsers it has to run on and everything, and then the amount of code in it. So it's well tested. It's like a well tested pipeline. Um, there are Circle CI's front end is all in ClojureScript and Ohm with React. Um, Man, some other big ones. Yeah, I can't think of any offhand that like. No, I don't want to say because I'm not sure. I would just be guessing. Yeah.
So, how did you find the conference here? Like the people coming into your town and being the local celebrity. Did you find it an interesting new experience? Because as I understand it, it's one of the first conferences in like front end web based that is happening here.
Yeah, yeah, I'm really excited. We are not a big city and don't have a huge tech scene. And a lot of conferences will come here and they're a big conference, but they don't have a lot of like local engagement. It's just used as like a destination. Like it could be any conference. Um, but this one I've been really happy with. The organizers are super into New Orleans, and that's why they had it here. And it's not just like it's here this year and next year it'll be somewhere else. They're gonna do it again here, and so I feel like it's a great thing for the city. I'm gonna go back and tell all my friends that like it was a great conference.
So, is there an opportunity to spawn off a meetup group, like a monthly thing, to meet with locals here to keep it alive while until the next one is coming up?
Well, we have meetups. There's a front end meetup that happens every month. I don't know. I don't know what else. Like if there would be enough for a second one. That's.
Yeah, or maybe get some extra sponsorship, or like
Mm,
keep the spirit of the conference alive
yeah.
until the next one comes around. That was the big success of JazzCon, for
Uh huh.
example. That like
Okay.
it was a conference, but then they actually opened up their materials for other people to run conferences like a
Oh, I
JazzConf. Like
see.
they opened their code of conduct to reuse. They opened their
Mm,
materials, their sign up
that's a good
processes,
idea.
kind of things.
Yeah, that's a good
So
idea.
that's a good opportunity to
Mhm.
do that, and also to feedback talent that you find in the meetup group and feed it back to the organizers
Oh,
here and say
right.
like, okay,
Right.
over the year we found these 5 people
Are
to
really
do
great
great talks.
speakers.
Like,
Yeah. Okay.
how do we get it there?
Yeah.
In terms of location, seems to be. I almost feel bad flying back tomorrow because I haven't seen much,
Uh huh.
and it seems to be a beautiful place to. It seems to be a very touristy place in one part of the area, but there seems to be a lot of stuff going on here in terms when you say there's meetups, there's
Yeah.
all kind of what are the large corporations that people are working here for? Are there
Yeah.
any big players
The
that
big
hire a lot of
one,
people?
the big one right now is GE.
Hmm.
GE has a software development office here. Um, But see, that's what it's. We don't have a big scene. There are a lot of local companies that do like sites and apps. There's a site called Turbo Squid that if you're into like writing video games, you probably heard of it. They are a 3D model marketplace, and so video game shops use them all the time. And they're local. There's another one called iSeats that does. Uh, like event ticketing and stuff. And these are like big established companies that are just here locally.
I found it very interesting being a speaker that goes anywhere in the world, and I find it fascinating to go in I wouldn't say fledgling, but in a community like this that is just starting and like that is just seeing the potential that it
Yeah.
has. It's much more exciting to be at lunch break and talk to people and see their day-to-day problems that they have to solve and seeing how you manage to inspire them to
Huh.
do something different.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that are in large places where there's conferences every week, like San Francisco, they're actually it becomes almost a game of trying to impress each other with talking about new stuff all the time
Oh,
rather than
right.
implementing it.
Right. Or like actually solving their problems. It's like, let me make some new problems with a new library or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
what problems did you encounter that get you into ClojureScript? What did you want to solve the problem? What was your frustrations that it solved for you?
So the biggest one was this was when React first came out. Um, I was tired of doing DOM manipulation. Like I was tired of dealing with this problem of like figuring out when I need to change the DOM and keeping it in sync with my state as the state changes. And I mean, I was very fed up. Like I was on the brink of quitting web development. And then React came out, and ClojureScript was actually one of the first communities to start using React. And I started using it, and I was like, "Oh, this is brilliant! This is exactly what I've been wanting this whole time." And it fits so well. React is very functional, and ClojureScript is functional, so it just worked really well.
So it's a new, it's a different paradigm of accessing it. It's funny because somebody like me who worked with almost every browser and worked on a few browsers, for me the DOM was always this magical thing because I remember the DHTML days when we had document
Uh-huh.
all and we had like document layers in Netscape, and I'm like,
Oh
oh my
no.
God, we finally have a standard.
Yeah.
And now everybody's like, oh, this is rubbish, I don't want to deal with it. And it's like, but I think that's the evolution of technology, and that's
Right.
the interesting thing. The only problem is, of course, how do you under the hood again make that paradigm of not using the DOM perform well in the DOM afterwards?
Right.
How do you make sure that you don't write lots and lots of code that looks very performant and clever, but then doesn't render the speed that it should be?
Right.
And
Well,
backwards
Clojure.
compatibility, of course, another issue. Yeah?
Right. Right. Well, ClojureScript has an advantage because it uses immutable data structures by default. And how do you tell if an immutable data structure has changed? Well, the answer is always no, it hasn't
It can't.
changed.
Yeah.
And so then you can avoid a bunch of React re-renders
Yeah.
because you just see the data hasn't changed. Like, you only have to do one pointer comparison to know if it's changed. And so ClojureScript with React is actually faster than regular React.
Hmm.
Um, Even though, how could something compiled to JavaScript be faster than JavaScript itself? You're getting higher orders or higher levels of abstraction, and so you have more opportunity for eliminating work.
Hmm. And of course, as the original code is much more structured, you have a chance to optimize the generated code for
Yes.
just-in-time compilation as well.
Yes.
Because a lot of
Exactly.
times people just change things constantly, so we can't even cache them, and we can't.
Right.
Variable names are being changed and not being reused. Whereas, like
Right.
if it comes from a more structured environment, it works like that.
Exactly. And then you have the Google Closure compiler will do some optimizations like inlining,
Hmm.
unrolling loops, stuff like that. Um, because the closure script code has, there's a compilation step. That step is actually generating code that's really nice for Google Closure to be able to analyze. And so it's stuff you would not want to write by hand.
Hmm.
But it's able to output this stuff that the Google Closure compiler just like has a field day optimizing. So eliminating dead stuff, that's easy. But also like unrolling loops, recursive calls turn into, for loops, stuff like that. It's kind of amazing that you're able to sometimes get a little bit more performance than you would have by hand in JavaScript.
So, what's the next step for you now? Now you gave your talk here. You can wallow in fame and and do something with it. What do you think should be a good follow up to this one to do next?
Next time, well, so I gave a talk on ClojureScript and like how it solves some of the problems of JavaScript, but I think I might have to retire my slides because JavaScript is catching up. Like for instance, I didn't know that Webpack worked so well because I'm not like hooked into the JavaScript world so much. Last time I heard about it like a year ago, like it wasn't working well. People were having all this trouble, like the splitting and stuff didn't really work. But now that it's working, it's like at some point JavaScript is going to catch up, and there aren't going to be so many advantages to using ClojureScript instead of JavaScript. So I have to come up with a new thing to attract people. It might just be all the cool programs you can write with ClojureScript that you can't do in JavaScript.
Or a comparison. Here's what ClojureScript introduced that JavaScript caught up with.
Right.
Here's the differences between the two.
Right.
Here's where you learn that an abstraction can actually help a standard by paving the way and testing it out and finding the problems before it becomes a standardized thing.
Yeah.
Do you do you feel that there is an opportunity to feed back to standard bodies from a community like Clojure as well, or do you feel those are different worlds that are always at loggerheads with each other?
Well, I feel like stuff is happening both ways. So, like I said, ClojureScript was one of the first communities to use React. And then the stuff we were doing in ClojureScript got turned into Redux. So it came back, right? And now there's a lot of work to do something similar to GraphQL. So the GraphQL stuff is feeding into ClojureScript, and then I'm sure it'll feed back, as we come up with new stuff.
Excellent, exciting times.
Yes.
Well, thanks very much for your time.
Thank
I hope
you.
you had a good time, and you're gonna have an easy job getting home.
Yes, I just bike home. So.
Excellent, great to see
All
you.
right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I think we're at the home stretch here. I don't know if there's more coming, but Tara just is around the corner, so I don't know what's going on there. Maybe she's gonna be next. Oi, Tara, are you next, or what's going on?
If you want to continue doing interviews, it's fine, or we can just stop now.
Let's take Tara and end on a high note.
I don't want to overwork you.
That's fine.
You can take your beer up there. I think that'll be.
Oh.
Yeah. So we're finishing off at JazzCon here with the live interviews. I hope people have watched. If not, at least we have recording, so that's pretty nice. And it made me do some extra work and feel useful for the conference as well, so that's pretty good.
That matters. You should feel useful.
Yeah, take your lanyard off because it's actually scratching against microphones, and people have been complaining about this, and we don't want to antagonize the 3 or 4 users that we have. So let's end on a high note, and let's end on the lady who's drinking beer live on television. She works for Telerik, by the way, for now, and fair enough. So Tara, what have you been doing here at JazzCon, and how did it go down?
Well, you just want to know about the food I ate, right? That's it. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, obviously, this is exactly what I want to do.
So I just wrapped up a talk talking about data visualizations and how in Angular, how you can go about binding different data to the different data visualizations. And so I'm a developer advocate for Kendo UI. So we do UI components, and we make them specifically for Angular. So they're native Angular components. So you're using a lot of the binding that's coming with Angular too. So I talked a bit about how you can do the two-way binding with event and property binding so that users can enter information and immediately the chart shows what exactly they were processing. And then also do live data, so you're getting all the information from GitHub immediately because you're using observables and getting that information asynchronously. And it updates the charts, and you have default styling, so you basically can then sit back and watch your beautiful data unfold.
So how does it work in terms of accessibility? I mean, it's always nice. It's always easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's easier to make beautiful graphical interfaces. But making them understandable for somebody who cannot see them
Yes.
is a bigger issue. Is that something that is thought of there as well?
Yeah,
Or?
so that's something that we want to take advantage of more. So the first step we wanted to do was make sure that we were really working with Angular well and doing native Angular components so that you're not wrapping anything. You have a component that it can take advantage of all of the things that make Angular fast, like the AOT, tree shaking, and universal rendering. So now we want to kind of go in, and I actually started doing more research on this myself because it's interesting that when you make data visualizations, you're trying to reach more people. Like that's why you make data visualizations because it's easy for people to see that this bar is higher than this bar, right? So already you're making your data more accessible. But what about people who can't see them? Like you're leaving that group out. So there are more. I actually talked to somebody about this at the San Francisco Women Tech Makers because she focuses purely on accessibility. And she was saying a lot of the strategies that we could start looking into are doing text to talk and like making different parts of the properties of our charting uh, go through in the what is it speech.
Synthesis.
Yeah, and so then you could basically go through and listen to what it says. But then do we add descriptions of the graph, or do we even go as far as to say what the data is representing or showing?
I mean, that's the main question. It doesn't make any sense to give you like a whole list of numbers that you don't know the context with, because by the time you hear the 15th number, you don't even know what's going on anymore.
Yeah.
That's what tabular data was sensible, because it kept repeating the table cells, the table headers with the data as well. But of course, it was still ages and oodles of data to go through. So having a descriptive way of explaining what the data is, what the findings in the data are,
Yeah.
and just display that one even as a visual and as an audio version is, I mean, I don't know if synthesis is really a sensible thing, because if somebody who cannot see, he will not have reached your website at all if he hadn't listened to it in a screen reader up front.
Yes.
So it's always like, oh, let's put some technology on top of it to solve the problem, rather than like, let's tell the story of the data. Of course, the problem is that a lot of times visualizations are being used to find the story.
Yes.
So you don't even know yet, but you could use a proper graphical interface like this to actually create more accessible data stories. So that would be one way of dealing with that.
Definitely. I think that's a very, very good point. And it's interesting, too, because you could possibly do it where one of my coworkers, Brian Rinaldi, was saying how doing pitch to kind of say, like, if the line's going higher, it's like the pitch goes high and then it goes low. And so you can kind of use not even words to do that, which makes it even more universal, because if you're just using pitch, it's not a language barrier as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can be super annoying as well, depending how complex the chart goes.
You don't want to just hear a pitch go.
Of course, the problem with any visualization engine is like there's a lot of times it's very easy uh, uh, to make graphs that look intelligent but actually give you the wrong story.
Oh yeah.
So
There's a few organizations that I think bank on on making that happen.
yeah, I always love the like when people like here's a talk about 50 minutes how to make a pie chart, and then everybody who is in charts knows pie charts are the worst way of displaying any data. You're like, great, you just spent 50 minutes of building something to confuse people. But do you think the danger there is as well that a lot of times people these kind of interfaces, these kind of libraries are being used by people, and it gives them a wrong sense of ownership and knowledge that they actually do not have, whereas like a proper UX person or data science person even who knows it should be dealing with these kind of things. So is there an abstraction layer into this that might be more interesting for people to that know about data as well?
I feel like so I took a class in school, a data visualization class, and we spent a large chunk of time on data integrity because so many people will do that. They'll misconstrue data purposefully.
Hmm.
But I think that with a lot of, at least with our visualizations, when I use them, putting in the numbers, it's hoping that your numbers don't lie, right? So you're hoping that that it doesn't misconstrue. But I think that's a tough problem, and I'm not even sure how you would solve it. Have you've thought of a solution though, haven't you?
No. I'm asking you. You're the expert here. I mean, I'm like.
I'm the expert on making graphs really fast in Angular.
Okay.
That part I can do really well. But
But
I think it's a very interesting question though, because we want metrics, right? We want to make our data work for us because we want to give people more information. We have so much data now from everywhere, but it's not as easy. Like we don't have too many easy ways to make that data useful for us. And so that's what we're trying to do with the Kendo UI graph chart library. It's basically make it easier. So yeah, I think that's a valid question. That how do we make sure that not only are we making it easy, but we're keeping up the integrity of data that's put out there. And I think that's a little more than I can handle today.
a big thing about charting libraries, and there's D3, there's high charts, there used to be all kind of things, is that the visualization and the painting is one thing, but also the data filtering and the making the data available for proper display
Yeah.
is another lot of set of APIs that are necessary, and D3 is doing a really good job at that. Like, is this something that you're providing people with as well, that automatically finds the boundaries for you, for example, or finds outliers, finds like cleans up data automatically that you put in?
Yeah, and I mean the way that we usually go about doing this is so a lot of it's, what we're trying to do initially is take the hard work out of making complicated things. So like grid components and charting components, there's a lot of work that actually goes in behind the scenes to make those. So if you wanted to make those yourself in say vanilla Angular or whatnot, it takes a lot of the work out of it. But then we also put a lot of things into it, like the interactions that we make for the users to be able to, just take slices of data and look at it visually, or like kind of hone in on certain parts of it. But what you're saying about kind of finding, like digging in deeper to find things inside your data for you, is that what you're saying?
Well, the normalization of data is a very important thing. That like there's always I've never encountered clean data in my whole life. You
Yeah.
always get like this massive Excel sheet that has some
Yes.
weird stuff in the middle of it, and it's always like when I wrote my own visualizations, I always had to like, okay, let's go through everything and do a max and min and these kind of things. So and D3 has a lot of those that basically allows you to say like, okay, give it a certain percentage of error handling, and it will automatically remove that for you.
Yeah, because we like the one that I showed was one that they made for our for the Telerik GitHub issues, and so I'm pretty sure that like a lot of the boundaries that you can set, like the obvious ones like date, but so you're not going to get any of those weird ones that you accidentally made one that was 2071.
31st of February kind of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
But I should look. I would have to look into that to see any other normalizations that they do with other parts of the data, because that API, I was just telling them it's this crazy long list of the smallest details that you can change with your graph, with your charting components. And it's a very long list. So next time when I have like a 4-hour talk just on a part of a component,
Nice.
I'll have more of the information.
What is the output format? Do you use SVG? Do you use PNGs? And I mean, that's the great thing, because that can scale to any high DPI display as well without looking blurry. And of course, in the past, Flash was the big thing that you did all these kind of functionality, and now we seem to be reinventing it in XML,
Yeah.
which is basically SVG. And but the interactivity of XML is interesting because it has a proper DOM. You can make things clickable, you can make things movable. It's much easier than generating images and putting image maps on top of it.
Yeah, and that's what. So with the default theme, we also take advantage of that. Making everything responsive immediately with the theme, the default theme. But yeah, because I was messing with that, like doing the projections to see how well it came out, kind of doing graphs on the fly, and it's always interesting to see how things hold up. So far, so good.
How's the output size? Because I always found that generated SVG can become very big, and there's systems like OMG SVG by Jake Archibald that you can drag and drop SVGs into, and it actually gets rid of all the unnecessary data in it while it keeps the look and feel of the final output. So is there any optimizations in that one in the system as well, or is it just something that you right now need to see people use it and then find the slowness of it and then start optimizing, or is there something already in there?
Because we make sure that we take advantage of all the Angular optimizations because we are, since they're native Angular components, that way you can use like right out of the box, you can use all the AOT and tree shaking and universal rendering. So then you have those benefits for performance. But as far as doing our charts, I'm not quite sure if they any optimization they do.
Hmm. How about exportability? Can you save them as images afterwards, or can you?
Uh,
Oh God, I feel so bad.
Oh, I don't feel bad. You should feel bad. That's totally fine. I've never exported them, so I haven't done that part with the graphs. But I will definitely look into it and see because I'm sure that's got to be quite useful. And I know that we're doing one for we're doing a talk to work with the native script group to see like how we can adapt these things to work together. And I think that would be an interesting part of it to be able to once we have the information and then graph it out and then be able to export it to even like use farther on down or further on down the line. So. No, that's good. That helps them like, oh, good. What to do next?
So, what was the feedback that you got from people here? How did people like your talk? Did you get some good questions? Did you get something that challenged you, except for mine?
Wait, that's a good thing. I want to be challenged. I
Okay.
like being challenged. This is good. So the first talk I did yesterday was on it's basically like turning your ideas into pixels. And so it's more I run two universities in Cincinnati. I started up the Women Who Code there, and I co-run the Node School there. And one of the biggest things that I always hear or have conversations about are all these people that are like, I have this idea. It's a really great idea. I'm thinking about it for about 2 years, and I'm like, oh, let me see. Like, what do you have? And they're like, no, I have an idea. I haven't figured out what framework yet.
That's one hell of an idea to keep for 2 years.
But so many people do this. Where they're like, I have this idea. It seems really great, but it's just in their head. So it basically like went through a kind of a way to make sure you get pixels on the screen because you can't edit something that doesn't exist, right?
Hmm.
So that was very interesting because I talked to a lot of people after that talk who they were like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna go after lunch and I'm gonna put this in there. I'm gonna make this project happen. And so that's been really fun too because.
But did you follow it up, or did they lie to you?
Well, I didn't. I like to live in a world of denial, so I just didn't ask at all.
Nice.
I should ask now. That wouldn't be creepy at all.
It's like, you promised me.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you lie to me?
You make me feel so bad.
Yeah. But that's what I've loved about this conference a lot so far is everybody has just been it's been so easy, and besides you, I mean, everybody's been so easy to talk to.
Mm.
Kind
Just called me easy. Anyway, but do you think that's a general problem that a lot of people that are not? I mean, as somebody who worked with the worst environments in the planet, I just made things go and then I fixed them while I was doing them. I put my ideas in there, tried them out, and then started optimizing them afterwards. But it seems like a lot of people have that barrier of if it's not perfect, I'm not going to even start it. And
the empty page, yeah.
and that's something that I think even our environments, when we got away from like waterfall to more agile development, and when open source became much more of a thing, and also Creative Commons, it seems like there's a collaboration aspect of something that you throw out an idea and have other people help you with. That helps breaking that barrier a lot, doesn't it?
That's true, but I think also people, not all coding communities can be friendly.
That's what I just wanted to come to. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes that can in itself be a barrier to, reach out to a community, even put code anywhere and hope that you don't get. Hi.
Hi, you're in front of a camera. We're live on YouTube. Say hi.
Hi.
So some communities are not too inviting.
But I think that's been a fun thing though is that you you find
You can
people
come back and join us if you want. No, no.
you made such a good introduction.
Excellent.
Actually, we were talking about this yesterday with how like it's not even the communities, but even some codes cannot be as inviting. Like there was an article about writing a JavaScript application in 2017. How there's so many different things.
I
you have
got
to
very
write
angry
about
about
that.
this one, and I had it partly in my keynote because it turned out it was a very satirical article where somebody tried to be funny, and a lot of people took it head on and basically saw like, oh yeah, that's true. I'm now scared of JavaScript because it's so complex because I need to use 12,000 things
And
instead
you
of just
should
writing
be.
code. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just it. And it's just like the last thing you want to do is make people afraid of writing applications, because I mean it's like it's not the best part. The best thing you can do to learn how to code is to write code,
Mhm.
right? And so you don't want to put people off, and that's why you don't want communities that aren't friendly, and you don't want to make things that make people think it's hard, that and scare people off, basically,
So how do
intimidate.
how do we change communities like that if we avoid them though? Like, is there an opportunity to have moles inside those
Well,
communities
see,
and change them from the inside, or?
I think that there are good people in every community, and I don't think that we should. I don't think that I actually was talking to my coworker about this on his podcast on East Sleep Code, where we talked about taking the negativity out of communities, because a lot of things that stem from that are, so say you're in the open source community and you're writing a project and you're not getting paid to do it, and somebody's like, your thing is broken, it sucks and I hate it. Like, what is that helping? Like, that kind of negativity just it weighs down on people who are trying to build something up for other people. And then they can even respond back and have a negative thing of their response to them. But I think that the most important thing is empathy, even for people that you can't see in person. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people, is they're just looking at a screen name, they're just looking at a screen, they're not interacting with the people, they forget they're people just like them. So I think the biggest thing in communities is to remember that we're talking to one another. We're not next to each other, but we're talking to another person.
It's interesting, like Microsoft in our open source projects, we have a code of conduct in the code resource as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Basically, like, okay, we don't allow these kind of comments, we don't allow these kind of issue answering, like calling people names, all kind of things.
Yeah.
It kind of feels depressing that we are ended up at the stage where this is necessary, but it helped, and it made a difference to what kind of contributions we get, and also to increase the diversity of the people
Yeah.
putting things in. My biggest concern about this though is that, like, I think open source, and like especially with GitHub and especially with the amount of conferences that we do right now, it seems like it's become fashionable and people have no patience. They just basically they try to be as much, and then there's negative feedback coming and they throw away the towel immediately because they
Yeah.
burn themselves out by trying to release too much. I've been doing open source for about 12 years, and I pace myself in what I contribute, and sometimes things like GitHub, especially displaying the, like, how much you contributed in which time,
Yeah.
that is almost a gamification of the system, and it can cause a lot of trouble. It's like people feel that they're not contributing enough if that graph doesn't change every single day.
Yeah.
So you think we should tackle that competitiveness of our market first thing, because that allows people with just an idea to
Yeah.
contribute and let the idea lie for a few months, and if there's not 6,000 likes and stars on the first day, that's not a problem either.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, do you think that's taking away from anything of the community to not have things like that?
I think it's just it takes the pressure away, and to me, open sourcing things was always about, like, talking to a community and getting a community to help you with what you're doing, and not like being the person that brings the most into the
Yeah.
community. This is not like I mean, being good and being helpful is not something that is a competition who's the most helpful. It's
Yeah.
more like everybody should be helpful and inviting, and then it becomes a self-sustaining system.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a few times where it kind of I think again it's something to do with people not realizing that the people making this code that they use that helps them is made by a person. They just want their code to work. They just want this thing to be fixed now. And they just think, oh, it's a piece of software I'm using. I want this fixed. So I honestly think again it's a thing of remembering that it's people.
Hmm. It's sometimes interesting though because we want people to be known as people, but at the same time, when I look a lot of online uh, Twitter avatars, Twitter bios, GitHub bios, it's like I'm this cool robot node person, blah, and I even don't know who that person is.
How do
So
you know if they're not a robot?
yeah, well, their code is normally a bit too confusing for that. But the no, that there's a big issue of like of people uh, creating rock stars in our community that don't really exist. And I get this when people come up to me like, "Oh, can I talk to you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we're in a pub." Like kind of thing, you know. It's like they're like, "Oh my God, you've been doing so much, and I used the pattern that you invented, and I used these kind of things." And I'm like, "Yes, it's quite what you want." Like you know, it seems like there's it's getting a bit away. But the last few years we had a lot of like we need more codes, rockstar coders, and that then people made up a cool coder persona of themselves, and then got frustrated not being able to keep up with the pace of the persona that they created, and that got them frustratedly leaving the open source community. And a few of them became very obvious and talked about it. So it seems like more people start talking about this toxic way of open sourcing, and
Yeah.
it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because of that.
But I think it's also one of the things like how when we create a code of conduct and we put it out there and we talk about it, it's the best way to start approaching it, to like put it into existence, to be aware of it. So I could also see it though as a way to talk about it, to put it out there, to make people aware so that you can avoid it. Like, you don't it's like the implicitness of it. You want these things to be out in the open, to be aware of them, but then you should use that information. I mean, you can't force people to do so, but you should use this information to make things better. So maybe hoping that if that is a self-fulfilling prophecy, maybe in itself there's also another half that's making it more recognizable, so that somebody who started putting all of their efforts into doing an open source project would read that and be like, oh, hey, maybe I should take a step back. Maybe I should do what Chris said and kind of make sure I'm delivering things slowly but surely at my own pace to make myself comfortable. Because I do think that knowledge is power.
Would be one way to go back from and not only valuing code contributions, but valuing things like writing documentation, cleaning things
Yes.
up, making visualizations to explain the things actually more valuable than just adding code to it. That as a community leader, you actually should support people that put more social things into your product more than people that just contribute to the core functionality.
But should you make things more than other things? But I think it should be put more emphasis on it that you can do that because I think that's also very beginner friendly too.
Yeah.
Because and it's not just very techie people that like maybe you need technical writers, and not just people who are writing code. And that makes your community more rich as well. So I think that's a great point, and I think that when you make like the contributor markdown files to let people know how to contribute, or tags of help wanted to let or beginner friendly, or maybe editor or designer, like add more labels, add more tags that can pull more people into helping these open source projects. I think it's a great idea.
I'm very impressed with what the Visual Studio Code team is doing. When you look at their GitHub account, this is exactly how you should run one. It's pretty impressive how they actually are very, they're answering immediately, they're answering issues, they have there's no questions how to contribute, there's no questions like what is needed, and it's a variety of things that are asked for, not just like write code for us, but actually here's like, okay, can you help us with the documentation? Can you help us with filing bugs? Can you help us with testing things out? So there's a lot of of good exercise out there. We talked earlier already about the My First Pull Request website by Charlotte, and there's some really good stuff out there. And I think there is a great opportunity to move these things forward. So, in your work with the tech makers, do you think there is a opportunity that now that JavaScript and web technology has moved out of the browser and desktop space into like notebots and Arduinos and these kind of things? I found that teaching coding with like making a robot move around excites people who are completely different to the market that we have right now. Making it physical is actually much more rewarding for a lot of people, like saying like, oh look, you made a thing on the screen.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, that's how I got introduced to going into school for computer science. Because I took a screen-based and physical computing class where we had breadboards and Arduinos, and then used processing. And I think it was really interesting because you can make things that work for you. You can make machines that work for you. And one of in code debugging the gender gap, there was a young girl saying that what she liked about it is instead of being a consumer, just a consumer, she could be the producer of these actual things. So she didn't just have to consume, she could make. And I think that's a big thing. It's a very empowering thing to people too. And I definitely think going in that direction, getting hands-on, will bring more people into coding and more people into those kinds of fields, into our layer.
Okay, so what is your to finish up? Because there's people running around, we have raffles going on and stuff. What would you think is the main trick that got you away from that blank page problem? How did you get from like, oh, I have great ideas that nobody wants to hear or in my head sound great to just trying them? What made you jump over that hurdle?
I think that I kept telling people that they should do it, and I realized I was being a hypocrite, and that I knew that I would benefit more from doing it because I kept telling people that they would benefit more from just doing it. And I realized like I need to listen to myself. I need to do this as well. And then I've done so much coding for jobs, for work, and in comparison to how much I've done for myself, and I realized like I deserve to have this fun project that I could work on that's bringing my ideas to life, and then that and the Angular CLI, those things made me get a project out faster because it's so fast.
Excellent. We heard it here. Angular CLI gets out of your rut of being not creative. So that's us. Thank you for watching, those who did. And we're off here from JazzCon, and we're off for coffees now. So thanks very much. And hopefully that was useful for some people, and you got to know more about the speakers that were here. Cheers.
Bye.